All right, and we are live. So, welcome everybody to my very popular channel, as it turns out. And I thought that today, it's a very quiet, nice Wednesday evening. It's very cold up here in Canada, where I don't know wherever you are. So, I figured today would be a great day to get together with a good friend, someone who I've buddy read with, and someone who I just admire and respect so much. And I
Oh,
wanted to get together with them and talk about books, but no one was available, so I ended up stuck with Ben. No.
very suitable, very suitable. That's okay. I have a very humble channel myself, and you've recently blown up with your Wind and Truth review, which was a fantastic piece of booktube literary analysis. Like
Oh,
I'm not even joking. Like I was extremely impressed by what you put together. It was very AP Canavan like with the examples of pages of prose, and I was blown away by how you edited one of the sets of pages down to one page, and I'm like, wow, I would have enjoyed reading your version of Wind and Truth a bit more, I think. So well done on that video. It deservedly blew up and brought some attention to your channel. So yeah, this is great though. You've just been getting your channel off the ground. That's what, a lot of people make these channels and just takes a while for them to get any traction. And so that's good though. You don't have a lot of eyes on you while you're working the kinks out. And you got bookshelves coming soon for a
yep.
nice backdrop.
Bookshelves
We
are
got to
coming
get
soon.
you. We got to get you a mic as
Mm,
well.
that's true.
So, man, I have a spare one that I don't use, a Yeti mic. But if you were within the U.S., shipping it to you would be a piece
Yeah.
of cake.
No. I have this thing, but I guess it's like not as good as you would think. But I don't know. I need to figure out. I need to figure out a lot of recording stuff. And that video too. Like, to be honest, you have no idea how nervous I was putting that out there. I mean, you kind of do because we talked about it, and it was great because you encouraged me to put it out, which is very helpful. But
Oh,
I
you,
was like
you
I was a complete bag of nerves. I was a bag of nerves when I filmed it. I was a bag of nerves when I
it
uploaded
didn't it didn't come across that way, which is the case usually when people are nervous with
Yeah,
like it's okay that it doesn't. Everyone's nervous when they are out in front of people or doing public speaking or performing, and you crushed it. You crushed
yeah,
it, and you could see that even with something that's very popular, there's a desire for differing opinions than the consensus or than the norm, and so you came with the receipts. You backed up your claims with
wow,
actual like evidence, which is much more than most people are doing in any booktube video. So that was amazing, and
yeah,
I'm very much looking forward to the future of your channel. But even if we don't make many videos, I just enjoy buddy reading stuff with you. So that's great that we were able to find each other this year and
yeah.
just have a blast, like just like reading the same thing at the same time and being able to, when we came across a particularly awesome line or moment, to be able to share that. And I'm sure we'll touch on some of those authors today
Yeah, for
that
sure.
that happened with.
I mean, like 2024 for me was like a great year of reading, but one of the best things about it was like this was a year I published my books and I just kind of got a bit more integrated into this community. So like the indie author community, but also just generally BookTube, which has been so like incredibly welcoming. It's kind of it kind of doesn't make sense how nice everyone is here, to be honest. But like that was just one of the most fulfilling experiences was that I finally had friends to read with, right? And like I bugged you, and we read a whole bunch of books together, and
Yeah.
that was a great time. Did some
No,
buddy
that's why I
reads.
joined BookTube, is because I was just kind of reading all these things on my own, and I
Yeah,
was just like I was seeing all these collaborative chats happening, and be like, oh, that would be fun to be involved in some of those, and so no, it is the absolute nicest, friendliest place on the internet that could possibly exist. Like a parallel community, our fantasy on Reddit is not nearly as
oh man, it's so toxic.
friendly and welcoming. Yeah, and
Yeah,
Heidi
Heidi is
thinks
here.
she's
So
already guessing some of my
cool.
favorites. So
All right. We'll
so
get to this. We'll get to this. Don't worry.
we'll keep these guesses in mind and see how you do.
Yeah,
I have
and I
not
mean,
released yet. I've been so behind on releasing end of year videos. I want to release my top books video, my most disappointing books video. So I have not done that yet. So what I discuss here is you're getting this first.
We're getting it. We're getting it live.
This is the inside scoop.
Nice. So I'm such a booktube noob that like I made a big mistake because I put out my favorites list maybe like a week before the end of the year, which turned out to be a bit of a mistake because I read a book in that last week, which I think would have made that list, and now I feel really bad, and I'm like, man, I should have put out 15 books.
Yeah, no, the same thing happened with me last year. Actually, I did my video a week early, and then one of my favorite things I started reading right after that. So it happens, but I think it feels like we kind of missed the time. Like most people are putting those wrap up videos out in the last 2 weeks of December, and you're getting towards the end of the year. It's like the holiday season, the winter break time. It's like that feels like the right time for this, and I've just been so busy with work and like not having enough willpower and energy where like when I'm low energy, all I feel like I have energy for is reading. And so I just like read up a storm and then end up not filming as much as I want to.
But let's see, that's just say something about you as an individual, because I think for a lot of people it's like reading is a very high energy activity, right? But it's really awesome because there's people like people in this community where it's what we do to relax. It's what we do to escape and just like leave our, I mean, I don't mean this in an offensive way, but leave our mundane lives behind and like go adventure with some really cool characters in this crazy fantasy world and just be a kid for a while, like let your imagination free. So
absolutely, amen. And when I take like, if I have like a long kind of meeting for work or something where I'm really tired out, the second I get off of that, I am throwing on usually my headphones and immediately am turning on an audiobook and like going on a little walk or just lying down and listening. And if I have the energy to also open the print book and immersively read, I'll do that. But that takes a little extra energy. But at the very least, I just want to throw an audio on and escape into a story.
Okay.
And Heidi's saying, I forgot brightness is your number one. That's for me? Okay. It's a solid guess. We will see how that goes. Or is that for Zamar?
So Aslan is asking, how many books a day do you guys read? I definitely don't read a book a day. I don't know about you.
So it very much depends on the size of the book. A novella, I might be able to smash out in a day, but I've been, over the last couple of years, my biggest reading years of my life, I've been like in the 80 to 100 book range. And so it's about one every few days. And the fact that I'm often like reading it in print, going through an audio, like I probably get a couple hours of reading time in a day usually. So I'm churning through books at a pretty good clip, like once every few days. But then some longer ones will come up and they'll take a week or two, and they just got to mix it up with the smaller ones.
Yeah, I feel like the 80 to 100 range is kind of a sweet spot on BookTube. It seems like a lot of people end up falling in around that range. Like I myself, I did 81 in 2024, which for me was like a lot. Like I haven't read that much in a year before, but where's that, like 9 per month or something around there.
Yep, there we go. We got an answer to Aslan though with that.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
How can you read and write? That's definitely not for me, since I have no aspirations to be a writer. Yeah, I just enjoy reading. So this is an interesting question, because I do feel like if I were trying to write my own story, and you hear this from authors all the time, they're like, oh, I don't read that much fantasy anymore, or I don't actually read that much. Like you hear that a lot from authors, which is fascinating. Like they often were avid readers, like in the younger years, and then once they're in their like professional writer stage, they're like, I don't read that much anymore. But not for everyone. Not for everyone at all.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can confirm. You and I have talked about this before, where I like when I was writing my two books up there, I really struggled with reading at the same time, because it's like your editor brain mode is on, and like, it's very hard to just immerse yourself in the story. But I've gotten a lot better at it. It turns out, and I think it was just a matter of practice, a matter of like dividing your time a little bit better, not burning out with your writing. I think that's really important. And then audiobooks. Audiobooks are like the absolute savior. It's like two different parts of your brain are kind of working through that. But I will say, like even now, I've been reading. And by the way, Ben, you betrayed me because we were meant to buddy read this, but I've been reading The Prophet of Idan, like Philip Chase's book. I was not going to read this. I was going to say, I'm going to wait for Alan's audiobook. And then
Oh
Ben was
no.
like, and Ben said, I'm
Okay.
going to read it right away. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll wait
I
and buddy read with
I
him.
will absolutely read that. I'll just be a little bit behind you. I had to finish DCC. I did not expect
You
that I
did
was going
not
to
have
read.
to finish
I did
DCC
not
for like the
expect that I
third
was going to
time.
finish that or read it the third time or get into the seventh book. That was just unexpected, unplanned. And then you know what else was unplanned for me? This is wild. So I won. I'm the patron raffle for Jimmy Nuts, and
Oh, cool.
there's like 100 patrons, and so you have like a 1 out of 100 shot of winning, and I won for the second time actually, and I put one of my favorite literary books on for because I think he would like it.
Yeah,
Snow
yeah.
by Orhan Pamuk. It's a from a Turkish author, and
Okay.
I read it back before my sci-fi fantasy days, like right when I had graduated college. It's my moody intellectual years, and this one, and so he's reading it. And I haven't read it in like 12 years, and so I am now reading this to kind of buddy read it with Jimmy, and so I probably would have started Prophet of Eden if I didn't. This is unexpected,
These are
very
very,
unexpected,
very thin excuses, and I feel betrayed.
very.
Just
But
saying.
I'll catch up. I will catch up, and when I am reading Prophet of Eden, I will throw all my reading updates your way.
Yeah. Okay, good. I mean, like, I'm okay with that because, like, what I was going to say is, like, first of all, the way buddy reads go with Ben is I try to get a head start because I know that by the time I get, like, if I get to like 50%, then maybe I'll finish the book like a week after he starts, right? Like, so I mean, yeah. But what I was trying to say is, like, I've been like taking my time with the Prophet of Eden. Excellent book. Really enjoying it. But I'm like 80% through and I've been reading it for a while, and it's just because I'm kind of back to writing. I've got this like new story in it and I'm in that zone. So it's hard to do the physical reads. So
Yeah. Oh, so
yeah,
that's my bad then that you weren't able to wait until the audio. But
it's okay. Don't worry about it.
reading the physical without the audio is a very different experience because I do notice the writing and the prose more when I'm reading in print. Like if there's something that is a word choice that I don't find particularly organic, or just like sentences and paragraphs that are kind of clunky, I will notice them if I'm reading it in physical in a way I just usually wouldn't by audio because you're right. I think it is a different part of your brain that really is kind of being exercised.
Yeah.
And I find audio to be more immersive. I'm usually just able to fully escape, I think, more so when I'm listening than just reading the print.
Yeah.
And so I did a lot of Wind and Truth, especially the preview chapters, like the first like quarter of the book or so, I did without the audio, like only in print on the computer screen. And it was just like the clunkiness of the prose was just shouting out to me.
Yeah.
And then I did a lot of it in print just when I got my physical book, and it just continued. But it was, even when I was just listening to it, still like the dip in the quality of the writing still showed itself. So it's not just a print thing versus audio. Because I recently actually just tried to listen to some lit RPG audiobooks. So like I'm a DCC fanatic. I am crazy for this. My first lit RPG, I did not expect to get into it. I didn't think I was gonna enjoy the whole subgenre of lit RPG. I didn't really fully understand what like all the different possibilities were with it and what would fit under that umbrella. But I went crazy for DC. So I'm now like, oh, maybe I'm gonna be a huge lit RPG fan. And so Brian at BellTube is a huge lit RPG fan. He has a video where it's like, try all these lit RPG series. And I tried out a few. Like I tried out like his most recommended one besides DCC, like One More Last Time. And it was very much like someone being ported like into a video game.
Mm.
And it just was not working for me at all. I could not get into it in the slightest compared to DCC. And then I tried another one that was similar to that, and the same thing. I was like, wow, I think this writing is just not high quality. I'm not liking the idea of being ported into a video game and it being like just a virtual reality video games kind of story. And DCC is not that at all. But I am gonna try out Matt Dinniman. I tried out the audio for his Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon, which is a standalone lit RPG book that he wrote before DCC. And I could already tell the difference. I tried a few other lit RPG authors. Then I come back to Dinniman. I can already tell just a clear difference in the quality of the writing for me, and me connecting to his voice and style. He's so intelligent and clever, and that was just not coming through with these other lit RPGs. So, oh, nice. That's cool that you liked Kaiju that much.
And Heidi is saying that she's listening to Curse of the Mystery, and you have to have absolute quiet, or you can miss a major plot point.
Ooh.
I mean, I believe it. And the funny thing is, because I definitely wanted to participate in January. But then I was also thinking, like, I do have Curse of the Mystery on audio. I just don't know if I'm smart enough to follow along. Like, it feels like it's something that would be best immersion.
Yeah.
Or just straight up with text.
I found I hit a real sweet spot with Malazan when I was doing it immersively. Like if it was just audio, I felt like I was missing some things, and I would have to, with really dense books, even with like Guy Gabriel Kay, if I'm just doing audio, I want to go back and I usually almost reread chapters in print to make sure I got every little bit, because I didn't want to miss a single thing. And but immersively, like that's a way that if you're able to do it, I think it can truly maximize the immersion, because when I'm in the groove with it, like I'm engaging my oral sense, and like I'm just getting the story, hearing it, and it's what's consuming my vision at the same time. Like I feel like then I'm just basically I'm not thinking about or noticing anything else in the world besides the story or the book. And if I'm just going on a walk or doing chores and listening, I'm like 95% with the story, but there's still like I'm doing something that's taking the tiniest bit of my attention away.
And then, I mean, the things you were talking about with how you notice prose more when you're looking at written text. I feel like there are some authors who write in a style which suits being read out loud a bit better. Like the example that comes to mind is Abercrombie. I mean, everyone adores the first audiobooks, and like Stephen Pacey is just maybe the best narrator of all time, sure. But I do really think that Abercrombie's writing is just really well suited to being read out loud, and like it's just like the perfect mix, right? Like the perfect match.
And Jenny even says that about her writing in Wars of Light and Shadows. She says that she really wrote it, intending it to be to sing when it was read aloud, and to flow with a certain rhythm and musicality to it. So you're right. Even writing like Abercrombie's, which is not musical, it can be a blunt instrument, but there's so much voice that hearing the characters, both internal monologue and external dialogue out loud, it just brings it to life in a way that just reading it on the page, you're right, it doesn't. I mean, I will so with some books, like if the audio is such a fun, engaging experience, I don't even want to pick it up in just print. Like I'm missing out on the fun aspect of hearing it. And when the narrator's great, it feels like you're missing out on something special if you just read it in print.
I mean, it's like how good of a script can you give the narrator, right? And I mean, like I criticized the narrators of Wind and Truth and like Sanderson's books, but then you kind of have to sit there and go like, I don't know if other people would really have done better anyway. But anyway,
Yeah, like
we don't need to.
like Simon Vance doing Wind and Truth. Like sometimes I've heard really like some of my favorite narrators narrating stuff that I thought was kind of beneath them, and it's just like it's like awkward. It's like, oh man, like this is not worthy of your performance
Talents.
that you're giving.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
so, like yeah, I don't think I think the narrators, I've listened to enough of them. I think they're actually perfect for the Cosmere books and Stormlight. Like they understand the characters on such a deep level. I think they really jive with Sanderson's storytelling approach, and they're fully behind him. And so I think they're the right narrators for the book. I don't think it was the narration that was really the thing. I think it was the writing that was what was getting in the way of your enjoyment.
Yeah, yeah. I think a bit of both. Yeah, Aslan was saying he can't imagine how someone can audio read Curse of the Mistwraith. And he also asked earlier, I don't mean to miss it, how long did Wind and Truth take you? So I think for me, it took about 12 to 13 days, if I recall. Something like that. How about you?
Oh, that's hard to say because I read the previous chapters like in chunks, and so I only had like the last 3/4 of the book to read after that, and it didn't take that long because I read it like on my travel back home from Dragonsteel.
Mm.
So like that was a couple hours at the airport, and then nice long flight where I was basically just reading, and then by then I was pretty far into it, and I was pretty engaged by the plotting that was leading towards the end. So it only took me a few days, but that was also just the without the first quarter of the book, which was very slow. I really did not like the first quarter of Wind and Truth. I thought really weak beginning, but
and I mean that's rough because that's like 300, 400 pages. So, yeah, that's like an entire book.
yeah. That's
Okay.
that's not nothing.
So now I think we should get to the meat of this topic.
Yeah, let's do it.
I invited you over. So I want to ask you, Ben. I mean, Heidi had her guess with a brightness long ago. So I want to ask, put you on the spot right now, and I just want you to think, close your eyes and think about the best book that you read in 2024. What comes to mind, and why is it this one, Fool's Assassin?
That's not a bad choice. I came prepared. I know what my answers are. I'm kind of curious. What do you think my legit real answer is for my favorite read of the year?
So, okay, I know that I'm trying to remember everything that I know you read. And I actually think Heidi's got a really good guess with the brightness because I know that one hit for you really well.
Oh, it did. It did.
Okay, let me think. What else did you read? Okay, the other option would be this one. I think you liked Assassin's Fate better than Fool's Assassin, right?
We'll get into it. I want to hear any more guesses you might have.
Did you read Sun Eater this year, or did you read it last year?
No, I read it over the course of the last couple of years. Only the new release, book 6 at the beginning of this year.
Okay. Let's see. You did your Sando reread. You read the Ken Deal books, but I don't think any of them would make the list.
Our first buddy read. Do you remember what that was?
Our first buddy read. Wasn't that a brightness long ago?
No.
Oh, Shogun.
That was our first buddy read. Yeah.
Yeah. True. I thought for some reason I thought you read that like last year or something. I was completely blank.
No, we were reading that at the same time.
Yeah. So, like, would you pick that? You're going for Shogun?
So, all these that we talked about are absolute contenders. Like when I'm thinking about my favorite books of the year, they're all in the conversation, but they're not number one. Like other years, this would have been my favorite book of the year. Like this blew me away. It was a perfect read. The horse race sequence is one of my favorite sequences, scenes, chapters I've ever read.
That was a hell of
I loved everything about this. It's crazy that this is not my favorite book of the year. But I did like a few things even more. Somehow, some way, I liked this. I was more emotionally invested or moved by this one. 11/22/63. I don't know how this one is not my favorite book of the year.
He's still teasing. He's still teasing.
Have you read this one?
No, I haven't read.
I was hesitant going in because I had only read a couple Stephen King books and haven't yet fallen in love with him. But the first chapter, oh my God, I was emotionally moved by the first chapter. And then I was as sucked into this time travel story as I've been into anything in my life. Like, I devoured this over the course of like 2 days, and it's huge. I could not stop reading.
Wow.
I did nothing those 2 days. Luckily, I didn't have to. I wasn't working then. I had like a couple days off. I was like living just for this. Besides when I was like eating, it was reading, and the audiobook is amazing. I was like doing a lot of it immersively. The text in here has a lot of character and personality. Like, there's like a lot of like font and bolding and italicizing that plays like a role in the narrative. So like just doing this in audio, you kind of miss out on a lot of the author voice.
Yeah.
So immersively is the way to go, because the narrator was just also incredible. Perfect ending. Like, I was blown away. This is a perfect read. These 2 books, 10 out of 10, and yet they're not my favorite book of the year. So that brings down our choices. You know what else was a perfect read? Shogun.
That was a hell of a read.
I DNF'd this book after the first time. I tried it last year. That might have been what you were thinking about. Maybe I mentioned that at some point. I did not love the first chapter where we're just with the Europeans on the ship in the storm and they're getting wrecked.
Dude, like, that was such a good chapter. I mean, I was in it from that. I was like, oh man, this is amazing.
I mean, it was cool in its own way, but I was looking forward to being in Japan. And like, I wasn't into it from that first chapter. And then I ended up putting it down, thinking maybe this whole style just wasn't for me. And then the show comes out and I watch the first episode and I'm like, oh my God, this show is freaking amazing. Like, this looks incredible. I have to give the book a chance, because I know that if I'm going to love the story, this book is going to be a richer experience. So I don't want to miss out. So I then went and gave this one a real shot after the first chapter, and it had me under a spell the entire time. I was so transported to another time and place, and I feel like I was the stranger in a strange land, trying to figure out what was going on around me. And like, man, I loved the different rhythm of this book. Like, it had a very like a slower pace, more deliberate rhythm than most things I read these days in SFF, where like some of these scenes just, they lingered, these long conversations, and they change POVs in the same scene, and you get the same conversation from different points of view, and then like 2 people, like, their conversation ends, and then you stick with one of the characters beyond the conversation, and like, you just, like, the 1,300 pages or whatever this is, like, we did not rush through these scenes, and they were just so rich in psychology and interesting, emotional lives and political factions, and I mean, it was so engaging on so many levels. And I have not read many stories about kind of a stranger in a strange land, like, culture clash. I remember loving, when I was younger, the movie Last Samurai, which was kind of a similar style of plot, and I think I really just love this kind of story in the first place. Maybe it's easy to imagine myself sort of in that situation, and the awe of discovering, that new culture, or the bumbling kind of like cultural back and forth is so pleasing when characters are learning from each other and coming to respect one another from an initial point of not understanding.
Like,
it's so rewarding.
like going into Shogun, I thought like we did talk about this before, I recall, but I was thinking like this is going to be some grand epic. We're going to have some crazy battles. It's going to be political drama and stuff. But in actuality, it was like a very personal and very intimate story. Like really, you spend probably like 80 to 90% of the time with just these like 3 or 4 characters, and you're just following them and the way they're interacting and their relationships are developing. And like there's this broader, greater drama that's like involves all of Japan, like kind of going around them, but it's almost secondary, right? It's almost like how does that drama affect these characters, and then like the interesting and genius of Toranaga and all that stuff. So I'm fully on board with you, man. Like Shogun was in my list too. Like that was.
And this is one where the narration by Ralph Lister was so unbelievably engaging and nuanced and interesting.
Yeah.
Like he brought so much to the experience of this. Like
yeah.
I was reading this one for a while. Like I didn't rush this one, and it's huge. The audiobook's probably more than 50 hours. Like this one took a few weeks to get through, and it was a few weeks I was sad when it ended.
Mm-hmm.
I was sad when this was left behind.
Yeah. Well,
I wish we had a second volume where it just continued. Like I read the last page and it's like an epilogue where it's like describing what happened like after the book, and I'm like, oh, why don't we just have like the next book of all of this? Like we could have another book this size covering the next few days.
Yeah.
And
so
like,
you haven't read Taipan, right? That's the next book, Taipan?
No, I haven't read anything else by him, but I know that the Asian saga is essentially interconnected standalones, and so they're and from what I've heard and know about the other books like Taipan and Gaijin, like they're very different stories, and they're not as like just universally cherished as Shogun. And I just have the feeling like this particular story with the cultural clash and these particular characters, like there was a certain magic with these characters interacting with each other, where like even with Clavel like writing something else, I don't think he would be able to find that kind of magic. Like it was some special sauce that was being mixed here, and
nice.
It's a not eloquent metaphor, but it is getting across that I am not expecting the other Clavel books to be like this and I'm not jumping at the chance because I don't want to be disappointed or let down.
They might surprise you though. I don't know. Like I've heard good things about Taipan at least, and then I'm not sure about the others. But so are you saying that your favorite book of the year was not fantasy but historical fiction?
It was not Shogun. I mean, this is an unbelievable book. It's memorable.
You're still teasing me.
One of my favorite books of all time. One of my favorite books of all time. And this is because this reading year of mine, it was the best year of my life.
Oh no.
Where like any of the books that I am talking about would easily be my favorite book of any other year, honestly, or most years. But I adored the way that Robin Hobb wrapped up the whole realm of the Otherlings with the Fits in the Fool trilogy.
Okay, are you still?
I will say.
Are you still teasing?
We'll see. I will say that I don't really love separating out books of like a trilogy like this, where they're so interconnected, where book one is like absolutely like set, like we can't have Assassin's Fate without Fool's Assassin. Like we can't have this without Fool's Quest. It's like I don't remember most of what happened in Fool's Quest, but I remember like it got the job done for a middle book of like doing what it had to stay compelling while just moving things toward where they had to go for the resolution. Like it was just she's a great moment. So good. She's so good at middle books. Yeah. And usually like they're not going to have the most memorable moments in her series, but they got the job done. Like if I say that my favorite Realm of the Elderlings book is Assassin's Fate, like it's built on the shoulders of all of the books that came before. Like Assassin's Apprentice and the setup that was done there, and Assassin's, and then the Tawny Man trilogy. Like, me loving all of those books is what eventually leads to this finale being so emotional. And maybe Fool's Assassin, I found to be like, from beginning to end, maybe it's a more impressive book, and I maybe appreciate everything that's going on in Fool's Assassin maybe more than everything in Full Assassin's Fate. But I do weight having an emotional experience a bit more than just being like intellectually engaged or appreciating kind of, as many possible factors as we can think of with a book. This had me very emotional, and very few books get me really emotional. And that made it like it's sticking the landing for a huge series too. Just made me so happy that I felt like it ended in such a cathartic, incredible way. And so I have a bias towards endings and finales and emotional experiences. And so this would be my favorite book of the trilogy and my favorite hot book I read this year. And still not my favorite book of the year, but it was incredible. I loved it. I respect, though, I could just as well say Fool's Assassin was my second favorite book of the year. Like, it's incredible. It's incredible.
Here, I think that they're very different. Like, I think like Jake here is mentioning here, Assassin's Fate it's really special because it's like the culmination of the realm of the Elder Lings. Like, this is about everything in this like gigantic 16-book series, the way it's all coming together. Like, this is literally a tour de force. It's like they like literally go across the realm. You see everything, the way it culminates,
and tying in so much with the Live Ship Traders trilogy.
Exactly. And like the Rain Wilds and everything. So really well done. We can't go into spoilers there. But I think like Fool's Assassin, by contrast, it's a much more intimate book, but it's like it's a Robin Hobb series starter where it just feels like you're coming back, right?
Absolutely.
You come to this after like the 4 Rain Wilds books. By the end of those, you're like, I'm done with these teenagers.
Yeah.
And then you start this book, and it's just like, it just fits, right? It just fits again.
Does. Yeah.
That's my boy. That's my boy right there. You just want to sit with him. You're like, it's Withy Woods. You just want to sit with Fitz and Molly, and like you want to drink tea with them. But then there's this like looming sense of dread in the background, and you're like, oh god, something's gonna go wrong. Oh god, Fitz is gonna mess something up. Oh, Fitz, you idiot, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It just that.
So the whole beginning chunk of the book feels like we're almost like stealing these pleasant, happy times and years. It's like we know something's gonna go wrong horribly, but it still is very satisfying to be spending that more comforting, cozy time with Fitz, and just like he's not on some grand quest. We're just chilling at the manor, and the new character addition that becomes a main character. Like, we probably want to avoid any spoilers around this, but there is it's a new trilogy, so there's a bunch of new characters that get introduced. But the surprise kind of where Hobb, gives us something maybe we weren't expecting with a new character, where that character, like, I felt like brought new life to the whole series in just a way that elevated it.
Yeah.
And beyond what I ever expected for the series.
Yeah, like it just it was just such a risk for her to take but it paid off so well. And I have to say, like, my favorite thing about the final trilogy is just the culmination of themes across like the full 16 books, like the way they all came together. And I think Fool's Assassin was maybe some of the deepest exploration of that, right? Like, it's just, I don't know. This was, I mean, if it's not obvious right now, this was my favorite read of 2024. It was also the first book I read in 2024. But I could see an argument for Assassin's Fate as well. Like, even though, like, I know you and I, we need to have a discussion on tier ranking Robin Hobb's books.
Yeah, we got to do that.
This would not be an S tier for me. It would be a bit lower, because I had a few issues, but like, I feel like you can appreciate it. Like, Assassin's Fate is your combination of the entire series, and then Fool's Assassin is just like a smaller, more intimate setting, returning back, and like, and it's emotional in a different way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if I didn't have a bias towards endings and like if a book made me emotional, I think I do appreciate the entirety of Fool's Assassin more than Assassin's Fate. And it's incredible. Yeah, it blew me away. You don't hear too much buzz for that book in particular because I think people get caught up when they talk about Realm of the Elderlings. If they talk about the Fits in the Full trilogy, they're often talking about that final book because,
Yeah.
man, this is the whole ending of this giant series. And so it makes sense that most people would be talking about that and not mention really Fool's Assassin or Fool's Quest. But those first two books were incredible. And without those, you don't have Assassin's Fate and making an impact. So it's hard to separate out individual books of a series and a trilogy in particular. I think often each one is so essential to what the whole thing is doing and to what the other ones are and to helping the other ones pay off. But as a book one, though, that is the one that stands alone the best, Fool's Assassin, which is yet another argument in its favor. So you might be convincing me here. I might be talking myself into it. But no, Fool's Assassin is incredible. I actually, if I had to guess for you, I haven't heard you gush too much because you read that before we were really buddy reading. So I thought your best read of 2024 was A Brightness Long Ago.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good guess.
Was it close? Was it close?
Yeah, man. It was very close. Like for me, I think when I ranked my best reads, I think I probably put that on like number 5 or something. But it was like the top 5 were just so interchangeable, man. They were all like so freaking good. And the problem is like, okay, I finished off the Hobb series, right? And Hobb is like one of my absolute favorite authors after doing that. And then the real problem was after that, I decided to read this guy, and it just blowed my I put these in front of the camera. And it just blowed my ranking apart, right? Like The Rise of Loch Lamora, I think I had that as number 4, and then Red Seas Under Red Skies was number 2. So yeah, like even though A Brightness Long Ago, it was magical, right? Like we had a buddy read about this. I think Heidi might have been there for that as well. But like, okay, if we sat down right now, Ben, I could not summarize the plot of A Brightness Long Ago. I don't even know what happened in that book, to be honest. But like, it just had this sense of magic. The writing was it just drew me in. It was my first experience with GGK, and it was like, I didn't know you could make words do things like that, you know, like transport you in that way. Where just the way he was writing things, the way he was switching tenses and using different POV shifts, and I don't know, like A Brightness Long Ago, a very, very special book. And we read afterwards, you and I, we read his duology, Sailing to Sarantium and Lord of Emperors, which I think we both loved. I think it's I especially love book 2. I think you also enjoyed book 2 more, if I recall. And like that was extra special as well. But Brightness just had that little touch, you know. There was just something special about it.
Just like some little bit of extra X factor with that one. Oh, that's interesting. So I got all of your top 5 except for number 4.
Number 3, I think, which was
you said Red Seas was number 4?
Lies of Loch Lamora was number 4. Red Seas was number 2.
Oh, number 2. Okay. So we don't know number 3 yet. Okay. We'll leave that one for a little suspense.
Okay.
It wasn't Shogun. It wasn't Shogun then. Wasn't Shogun. No. So, do you have a guess yet at my favorite book of the year?
Wind and Truth. I'm joking.
Wind and Truth did not crack the top 10, which is an upset because I love the first 4 Stormlight books. Hey, Philip.
Speaking of the devil.
Thanks. Okay. You missed his little gush at the beginning of the chat.
Yeah, I did say some nice things about Philip, but here's the thing, Ben. I've actually determined, after reading the vast majority of Prophet of Edan, being like 80% in or whatever that I am, I've determined that Philip Chase is a fraud, because there's no way that a man can be as nice and kind as he pretends to be and write a book that is this unrelentingly brutal.
Oh my goodness.
Like, it's just not possible. I mean, Phil, something's up in this guy's head, man. I'm telling you.
Oh man. I really was becoming attached to the characters in Way of Edan. So man, I'm not looking, like, if you say he's being really brutal. Like, ooh, boy, I gotta gird myself for what's to come.
No, I
I
mean, I like the Prophet of Idan. I think you know, it's hard to say, right? Like the Way of Idan had such a charm to it. Like it is just this classic fantasy story. But then you also had the Holy War and like starting up the Holy War and that sort of tension that went with that. It feels like the Prophet of Idan is just it's really action packed and it's very
ooh.
like it's very it's like I said, it's unrelenting, right? Like it genuinely feels like, oh crap. That's like, what are we gonna do now? Oh man, it's like all hope is lost kind of thing, right? So I still haven't finished it. Getting towards the end now, and yeah, like really good.
Ooh, ooh.
I
Oh,
think I
I'm
liked
gonna
it
be.
more, but yeah, it's really good.
Oh, nice. I'm gonna be diving in soon. Uh, and Philip, you came just time. Well, if you have to run, that's all right. We'll catch you later. But
Yeah.
we're just getting to my favorite read of the year.
We've
Is
been taking
Mars
our
trying
time,
to?
by the way. I've been trying to like pull this out of him since the start of the stream.
But it was just like you said. Your first experience with GGK was magical. Well,
Oh, a song for our bond.
mine was as
Ah,
magical a reading experience as one can have. And before we get into that, we can just finish up with Philip there.
that is accurate. Return to Eden is different again, possibly darkest and yet most uplifting. Well,
Oh, he's
I'm
gonna
really
hang
looking
out.
forward to that. Yeah. Okay.
So
Wait. In my defense, I thought you read that last year. Like, and I'm always just going to keep reusing that defense.
no,
But
this was my 2024 is my year of discovering GGK. This was
nice.
my first one, and like you said about picking him up for the first time with Brightness, like you just discovered something new about what people could do with language and could make me feel and transport me. That it was it was telling an engaging, compelling story while also evoking all kinds of personal emotions in me throughout, and it was making me nostalgic for things in my own life and taking me back and making me think through all the twists and turns of my life and relationships and relationship to art and music. And I've done a little singing and I play the ukulele, and that was a big part of my earlier life and in college. And that was a big theme in here, where this culture, this beautiful culture of Arbonne, treasures art and poetry and music and song, and combining everything too, which is what the bards and, oh no, I lost the word for what the name for the singers in here. You haven't read this, right? Um,
No.
oh, it's been too many months. So the bards are often the ones who are writing the poetry, the songs, and then the singers are often different, and they're kind of hired on by the bards, minstrels. Yes.
Minstrels. Mm.
And this theme that's carried through so beautifully here about trying to maintain this culture of that values love and romance and art and music, and is under siege from the cultures around it that are very different and do not value those things in the same way. um, it was I was so intensely wrapped up in the events and caring about this place and culture in a way that I don't think I've ever felt before reading fiction or nonfiction. And I, I like the last 200 pages, I was an emotional mess. Like I it wasn't that tragic things were always happening. Sometimes it was very beautiful moments and reunions and just characters forgiving each other, coming to a final understanding. And like there were just so many unbelievably just moving moments in here throughout, and beyond even just the ending part. The moments of the minstrel singing and the poetry of the songs. And I did a lot immersively, and you and Morton was just a very sensitive and beautiful voice for these songs as well, and they often had just a very important part that they were playing in the narrative,
Was
and
it?
there weren't that many of them, but
Yeah.
they just they just hit so hard, and yeah, so this book just had me utterly engaged and more emotionally invested and moved than I think I've ever been reading anything, and
Yeah.
the newness of the writing too. It's something that was special because I was so blown away by the writing quality and how it felt lyrical and evocative while not being very abstract or like an abstract poet. I don't usually get moved by really abstract poetry, but this was lyrical, but not so abstract. It didn't feel overly dense, but he was using just words in a way that were just with such precision and to evoke rhythms and imagery that just he would use words in ways I would never think to use them, and just I've never seen used before, and it's not like it was avant-garde or overly dense. It just is hard to explain
Mm.
the magic of his prose, but
Yeah.
it felt like something new and fresh.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, thanks for that, man. Like I like, yeah, GGK blew me away with the 3 books I read last year, and like I'm completely sold on like reading the rest of his bibliography. And the only thing now is like so many people, like you are one of many people I think who say A Song for Arbonne is their favorite GGK read, and a lot of other people say I think Lions of Oliver Stone, like those are probably the 2 most popular books. And I'm almost tempted to just save them, because like I
Yeah,
know that
yeah.
like you guys have convinced me that they're going to be something really special, but at the same time I feel like I need to get on this.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have read Lions this year because I knew that it was going to be overshadowed by this. So only a couple months after I read this, and it was such a special experience, Kyle picked Lines of Elverson for me to read as part of his TBR choices for me. And so I knew that that's one of his beloved books. I wouldn't have picked it up right then because I wanted to give a little space between it and Song for Arbonne, and I thought that was a perfect book too and moving, but this being my first experience with his writing, I think it was just so special that it then overshadowed Lions a little bit for me. I just didn't get as emotionally wrapped up in the setting, the characters, the plotting. I was invested in it, but just not to the extent I was for Arbonne. And I think if I would have left a few years between this and Lions, I probably would have maybe felt the same way about it. But I think I did have a little GGK fatigue. Philip is saying he's going to have his year of GGK. A lot of people do binge them all and love them. I think though I love the 3 standalones so much: Song for Arbonne, Lines of Elverson, Brightness Long Ago. I probably overdid it by then reading the Sarantine Mosaic duology, where I feel like I was seeing a lot of echoes of characters or plot kind of beats and things that I felt like, ooh, I wish I would have spread them out a bit more. So that's a minor regret I have about my year of GGK.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get the vibe that GGK is an author which it's good to savor. Like he's got it. There are very few people who write the way he does, which is not necessarily to say that he's like the greatest writer of all time or anything, but it's like a writing style that's very unique. It's got a very natural sense to the flow and to the way he just uses words to craft his world. But it's never complex, and I think there are very, very few people who write that way. So it feels to me like, when you have an author like that who's got a limited bibliography, it's good to just savor it, enjoy a few books every year and just really let yourself enjoy those, and then like you'll have more later on waiting for you. That's
and he really doesn't have that many historical fantasy books. If you binged for a couple months, you could get get through them all basically, and
Yeah.
and so he's become a favorite author. Like Brightness, Song for a Bone, they were perfect reads for me. Lions not far behind, and both books of the Sarantine Mosaic are not far behind for me. I also actually, looking back at the two books of the Sarantine Mosaic, I think now looking back, my favorite section is actually the first half of Sailing to Sarantium. Establishing the characters and going on the journey that they took to get to Sarantium, like that had me so captivated. And things are just complete. Like the last 3/4 of the series that take place in Sarantium, for the most part, are just have a different feel.
Yeah.
And a
Which,
lot of people just love
to
being
be
in
fair,
Sarantium. Yeah.
that was me. Like I liked
Yeah.
I liked book two overall, just more than book one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Heidi says I saw Brightness as a total retelling of Lions, which I take a little bit of offense to because I loved the Brightness long ago, but I also haven't read Lion the Fuller Sod. So I don't know what your take is on that.
Yeah, I can see it because I with the 5 books I've read, like you just see similarities in maybe the type of character, the type of major plot conflicts among the different main characters and political conflicts. Like I'm seeing echoes in all the books so far, and the it's not particularly standing out, let's say, between Lions and Brightness. And so I can see certain echoes between those two, but I can see different ones between any of them that I've read. So yeah, I don't think it was like he was just kind of retelling one of his earlier stories.
Mm-hmm.
The just the movement of the setting from kind of Spain type setting to kind of Renaissance Italy changed a lot and gave it a different feel and kind of different plot drivers. It's really religion that's the religious conflict that's the plot driver of Lions of Alverson, where it is something very different in Brightness. It's hard to describe what's going on in that book, but there's all these like Italian city states that are caught up in a political game, and then there's our characters who are just like trying to find their way amidst this greater political drama. And
Okay.
yeah, the writing is different though. The writing in Brightness is very different, and so while there might be some character plot echoes, he's like really experimenting with different kinds of writing here, which
It was
made
very
it feel
different
different.
from
Yeah.
it was very different from Sarantine Mosaic, which is the only other 2 books I read from him. Like Brightness felt a lot more experimental.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think, I don't, even if you read them back to back, I think they'd feel different enough that you'd likely be fine. But leaving a little space between them, probably even better, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my
Nice.
favorite read. I had such an emotional experience with it. It's kind of like the only comparable emotional experience I've had with any work of art or book was when I was just graduating high school and reading the finale of Harry Potter, which I had like grown up with along with the kids. Like I grew up with them at the same age, basically. And so like that was the end of my childhood. And that finale, it's like as an adult, like this brought me back to that type of vulnerability. And it was a really beautiful experience. So that was my best read of 2024, but among so many amazing reads, like the whole Fitz and the Fool trilogy, Brightness Long Ago, 11/22/63, and Shogun. I mean, where is it? There, Shogun. Like, I am so appreciative of all of these authors who just so enriched my life this year, transporting me with their stories and their writing. And
nice.
Yeah, and even some rereads. It was a great year for rereads for me. So like, I mean, some of my favorite reads I haven't mentioned, but I kind of read them the first bunch right at the end of 2023, and then reread them multiple times. And that's the Dungeon Crawler Carl books. Oh yeah, we got the first 3. We got the first 3 here in hardcover. Dungeon Crawler Carl.
And you mentioned that book
2. Then we have book 3. Unfortunately, they haven't released books 5 and 6 in hardcover yet, nor have they released book 7 in hardcover, but I did get the paperback, which Dinneman I think has the self-pub rights to. So
Nice.
he has quite the deal. He is maintaining like the audio rights and self-pub rights for the paperbacks. This is a new release, and like the publisher that's doing his hardcovers doesn't even have the ability to publish it yet, and for like a year, I think. So he signed some very sweet deal because like the Rabbids fans are going to get their hands on his like paperback or the audio, and then I've seen these books around like in Barnes and Noble, and like a lot of people at Dragonsteel had them to get them signed, which I did. I met him there, and he's going to reach such a wider audience with these TradPub hardcovers. And man, kudos to him for his success and leveraging his blowing up and becoming very popular. But I finished listening to all 6 of the ones that were out. I did not want to leave that world or the narration of Jeff Hayes, and so I immediately re-listened to all 6 at the beginning of this year and had an amazing time. I probably had a better time with it on reread than I did the first time through. And then with book 7 coming out, I did a whole reread of the 6 books just recently and devoured book 7 without the audio, which is not even out yet. And it was great, even without the audio. And so this year of very like more highbrow genre reading of Guy Gavriel Kay and James Clavell and 11/22/63, even like very serious books. These are some of my favorites from this past year. They are so intelligent and clever, and they're so tense. Like most of the time we're reading these, I'm just so tense and stressed and anxious about what's going to happen. And then there's these hilarious characters who just say the funniest stuff, whether it's Donut the cat or some of the other non-human side characters or the AI who's controlling the dungeon environment. But the stakes are high and real here. People are fighting for their lives, and I love the whole sensibility. And these have been so addicting for me. I've kind of been on a little bit of a mini struggle bus since finishing this. Like I tried a couple other lit RPG books to see like, do I want to ride that train? And they weren't working for me at all. And I'm like, oh, I'm not really in the mood for anything except this. Like when this audio comes out like at the end of this month, I think I'm going to immediately listen to it. Like I am so obsessed with this story, and the characters and the voice that Dinneman has is so fresh for me and
Nice.
intense and fun at the same time. You have not tried these out yet, right?
No. I mean, you've sold me on them a while back, but as you know, I'm a very sophisticated highbrow individual, so I would never stoop down to something like lit RPG. No, I'm joking. No, I've been putting it off, man. I do want to. Like the reception is just crazy. Like, if you ever go to like r/audiobook on audiobooks on Reddit, and like anytime anyone asks for any suggestion, you get like 30 comments which is saying Dungeon Crawler Carl. That's like the only audiobook that's ever recommended ever. So like it feels like I gotta do it, right? I gotta.
I've watched him perform on his he does cold reads from these books a lot on YouTube.
Jeff Hayes?
Yeah, he on his YouTube channel, he started an audio production company called Sound Booth Theater, and their YouTube channel, he's always recording on there, and so he'll put up a good portion of like the last bunch of DCC books of him recording them, and it shows you how he like does it in real time and edits it, and like it's more amazing than I thought it would be. Like I'm blown away watching him do it. Like I'm just in awe of what he's able to do. And it's just the perfect marriage. It's not that he's like the greatest narrator ever by like a wide margin. Like Stephen Pacey, Rupert Farley, James Marsters, like some of these narrators, like I think they might, be just as great a voice actor as him, but it's the perfect marriage between his personality and sensibility with the writing. And that is what I truly love when it comes to audiobooks, is when, Pacey with Abercrombie, like that's just a marriage made in heaven, and Martyrs with Dresden. And it is just like the true perfect match between Jeff Hayes and Dinneman and their sensibilities. And so it's special. The audio's fun, but honestly, these work in print too. Like, it's not just Jeff Hayes, because I was doing a lot of my reread of these in print out of my hardcovers, and then this one, and I was totally hooked and engaged. And I think Dinneman's a great writer, and he's very precise in his own word choice, and it has a modern sensibility to it. But like, I've tried out some other lit RPG, and where it felt like, man, the authors were just not putting a lot of thought into the language, or just were not capable of producing more impactful writing. And so, yeah, there's something I think that is special about Dinneman in this subgenre. So that is like a huge portion of my last year of reading, is falling in love with this series. So I couldn't talk about my favorites, because books, I didn't read this one in 2024. So if we're talking about 2024, books 5 and 6, 4 I might have done right at the end of 2023, but 5 and 6 definitely were just 2024 reads. But like, I feel like there is a clear uptick in my investment, especially the first read of it, when I got to book 4. I think like Dinneman just like found his stride with this series and figured out how to balance all of the different story elements perfectly. Things were a little bit clunky in the first few books in certain ways that I don't want to really get into before you've read them. But like, book 4, just like, it started like to just sing for me, of like, oh my God, this formula is now clicking on every level. And books 4, 5, and 6 like just did some of the craziest stuff you could possibly imagine. I can't believe someone imagined, actually. Like, and that, if that is continued into book 7, I mean, this is just one crazy thing after the next. And the way that he's able to do just huge, ridiculous, crazy action set pieces that have emotional stakes and like quiet beats to them, and the way he's able to balance these books and between the craziness and the quieter moments, it's a wonder to behold. So yeah, that's something I fall in love with, for sure.
I mean, I feel like you talk more about it than a Song from Arbonne. I'm just saying.
I mean, I spent a lot more time with it. So like, I spent the books 3 through 7 are big books. Like 1 and 2 are much shorter than the others. And I did the 6 books. I did the first 6 books 3 times this year.
That's crazy.
And some of those are big. Some of those are big books. And then I did book 7. So I spent a lot of time, many days of my reading life over the past like 14 months, 13 months. 13 months. Over the past 13 months, definitely by far the most number of days were just spent with Dinneman and Dungeon Crawler Carl. Like, so like,
yeah,
Song for Arbonne is just one book. What he was able to accomplish in one book, though, is staggering, and I can't even fathom it. Like, the complete story he's able to tell. But I do maybe like, I love long series because I love spending that time, the extended time with one story, with the long-term character arcs. And interestingly, though, in one of my favorite long-term series, where I reread the first 4 books and was loving it, and like, maybe I realized like there's a point at which you get diminishing returns with following the same characters, maybe beyond where it is we've already had emotional catharsis with them, and now we're following them at a moment where it's just much less impactful and interesting. And I still like this. I would probably bet it's one of your worst books of the year, or most disappointing, that you read like cover to cover.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, it was the one that I made a long video about. Um,
Yeah.
there were other books which were, I think, I disliked more. Like there were parts of Wind and Truth where I
Oh,
did
okay.
get into it. You know, and I did like the final thing was like, okay, yeah, there were good parts. And yeah, I mean, part of it is I just don't want to. I feel like I've contributed enough negativity to this
Yeah,
discussion
yeah.
around this book. So,
But
uh,
like, I'm curious. Like, I was a much bigger Stormlight fan than you. Like of the first four books. Like I really love the first four books,
yeah,
and it
yeah,
was one of my favorite series. And I've read those first four when I did this reread leading up to this. It was the third time I was reading them, and I found myself loving it, loving the reread. It had been a few years, and I was into it, and I had emotional moments in book one, and going back with Bridge 4 in book one. Like that's a really compelling story, that Kaladin's journey in book one, and going to the edge of
no spoilers.
almost of what? Oh yeah, going to the edge of the chasm and being pulled back, and
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
and the thing that happened at the end of Way of Kings, like that's a really cool moment. And Words of Radiance just has like a bunch of really epic moments, and then Dalinar's flashbacks in book three and leading up to his kind of climactic moment where his whole kind of character arc comes to fruition. And then in book four, like I found Navani's story just so compelling, and she's taking center stage, and she's shining and coming into her own identity. And Kaladin also, I think, has his moment at the end of that book of kind of reaching an apotheosis for his character of and and I thought for years after that I was like that this book was gonna like be the capstone on it all, and it's like one of my most anticipated releases. And when I was reading this book, I realized like I didn't even need this. Like
yeah.
I didn't need necessarily the plot endings that we got here to be satisfied with the story. Like I actually think if we would have wrapped the plot up maybe somewhat differently, obviously, like that we could have ended with we could have ended at Rhythm of War. And I would have been actually really satisfied with where everyone was left and not needing to know exactly how they continued on after that point. And
So yeah, I mean, I totally understand what you mean. For me, it's kind of hard to pinpoint because I don't know if I went back and read the first four books if I would enjoy them more. I just feel like a big part of it is my taste has changed, right? Like
yeah.
I don't know, maybe okay, this is gonna sound so obnoxious, but after you've read Abercrombie and Hobb, GGK, and you go back and read
Lynch.
Sanderson, yeah, and like Scott Lynch, you go back and read like Sanderson, and it's like, what are we even doing here? You know, like, it's just so pedestrian.
No, you're right though. Like this Sanderson basically like the authors that I read when I first returned to fantasy as an adult. I started with Sanderson, and like so his whole storytelling approach kind of has a special place for me
Yeah,
because of that. Like
same, to be honest.
and I read Sanderson and Gwyn, Faithful and the Fallen, and like and Michael J. Sullivan's Rhaenyra Revelation series, and I more recently tried to read some more Sullivan stuff, and it just like was not working for me. My taste has changed with him, and this
Yeah,
didn't click nearly as much as the other Stormlight books. And so I think my taste has been changing the same way because I think you can't help but like if you experience other styles, ones that are more elevated in what they're trying to do, and less superficial and less obvious. I guess it would be the most important thing. Like
mm,
I just kept on texting you these moments where like he doesn't need to over explain these characters' internal monologues to this extent. Like we can imagine, we can infer what they're thinking. It pulls the power out of it to see them thinking through all of their emotions at every step along the way in a way that just usually didn't even feel natural at all, like organic.
yeah,
It felt like Sanderson was writing to me, not these characters, speaking their internal thoughts. And so like
yeah. And
I
like
I I do think I would not have noticed that nearly as much if I had just binged I'm reading like fantasy for the first time as an adult, and I read Way of Kings all the way through Wind and Truth. Like I think I would have loved this more, but experiencing all these other more subtle authors it can't help but interfere with your love for this. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, each of those moments, and like it interrupts the scene, right? It pulls you out of what's actually happening into some random bit of introspection, which you really didn't need. Um, and then there's just it's kind of boring because there's nothing to really think about, right? It's like I don't personally feel immersed because the characters stop feeling real. They just feel like cardboard cutouts with labels, and like this is how I think I'm a robot. Anyway, I made a whole 51-minute video about the issues with this book. So
That's
we don't need-
interesting to me though that you had ones that you liked even less than this though. So I would definitely want to get into that a little
Mhm.
bit. But so like this was a disappointment. It
So it
I
was a
still liked it.
disappointment for you, even though you gave it 5 stars. Hmm?
Oh, absolutely. Because like
Yeah, because you
this
were
five
expecting like a
star,
6 star, like this, like top.
yeah, like this 5 star just I wanted to love this more than any other Stormlight book. Like I wanted this to be
Yeah.
Assassin's Fate. Like where like I just felt like it nailed the ending of this 5-book arc and where this series could be just cemented as one of my like favorites where I don't have any reservations about it. And to be so invested in it and then come to this and not be fully immersed like I had been with all the other books, like that was disappointing. But I still was able to be engaged for most of this.
Hmm.
And for a lot of it, I didn't have terrible complaints about the writing, but the continual clunkiness that I did notice was taking me out. But the fact is, I still had a good time with most of it,
Yeah.
especially after the preview, after the first quarter.
Yeah.
And so
And I mean,
I was engaged, and I did think he ended some of the arcs and put them in impactful places. And so I felt some level of catharsis with a lot of it. It just wasn't nearly as much as I was hoping.
yeah. And I mean, if I was going to be 100% honest, like when I made that video, like most of my complaints were about craft stuff. But the longer I've stayed away from it, the more issues I've had with like plot and character resolutions as well, where I just feel like it's just kind of a little bit underwhelming. If anything, like
Yeah,
this feels
yeah,
like a Cosmere setup book, right? Like that. It doesn't feel like the capstone to this grand epic of the Stormlight Archive. It's like no, like buy the next Cosmere book. Like we're gonna keep going, which is fine. But
yeah.
I
I
don't know.
agree. I mean, honestly, the farther I get away from it, the worse it gets. Like I feel like the 5 stars was maybe a knee jerk like reaction because I did really like the ending sections and some of
It's
the
it
lore stuff
it's
we
the
got
post
near
Stormlight
toward the
high,
end.
man. Like when you finish a
And so like
Stormlight book, there's always a high, and then you have to wait a
yeah,
month and then see how it settles. You know?
I think if I especially am considering like the first fourth of this that I really did not
Yeah.
love. Like it's hard to justify me giving this a 5 star rating just with my own rating system. Like I'm pretty easygoing with the 5 stars. Like if I'm engaged with a book all the way through and have some emotional investment, I'll give a book 5 stars.
Yeah.
I'm kind to this because I was not fully engaged all the way through. Like it's not fully meeting my criteria for 5 stars. So it's more like a 4 star read, honestly. I think I also had other factors that were leading me to be more invested in this, like me going to Dragonsteel. I was very energized to be in
Yeah.
the Sanderson fandom and the Stormlight fandom and
Mhm.
being around other people that were also enthusiastic about it. And so I think that helped me have a more positive experience than if I
Yeah.
didn't do that or didn't have other book friends who absolutely like loved this and were having a great time. And so, um, the social aspect of it, I think, did affected me in a positive way with this,
Mhm.
which is nice.
Yeah. I mean, and it's awesome that you had that experience because it's like undeniably it was the biggest book launch for several years or whatever in fantasy.
Yeah.
So like that's like I also bought into that hype, but I think I didn't quite get as much of that uplift as you did for my read, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Oh
was
man,
that? Yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
curious. That was that. So that I mean, it really was like a 4.5 star read for me. So not even close to like my worst read or most disappointing uh, read
Yeah.
of the year. I don't think you'd be able to predict it because it happened way early in the year for me, and I didn't talk about it too much besides my one monthly wrap up. for this. I don't think you'd probably even remember that I read my least favorite book of the year, but I didn't have that many bad reads. Like, I didn't love the new Bobverse release. I thought that was pretty lackluster. I read the Alex Verus whole 12-book urban fantasy series. I thought was really good. But this little novella that's like takes place after the 12th book was just like a little nothing, and it was so unnecessary. And like as the ending note for that series, really, I think is a misstep for him. Like he should not have created this completely superfluous story that people who are big fans of the series are going to read last. Like,
yeah,
misstep. Like you want to end on an impactful, strong note. That was really disappointing. The Gardens novella by Benedict Jacka. It's not even in the same like style as the rest of the series. Like it's a bit of like a horror slasher in a forest kind of little story. I don't know. Very weird. That was bad for me. Not a terrible story, but like not what I wanted to be my ending note for this long series that I spent many months with. I have not gotten into manga. I don't know if you've gotten into manga, but seeing so many people on BookTube rave about manga, like I have tried One Piece, I have tried Berserk, and they just didn't work. Like I couldn't get immersed in these stories. Like I don't have much experience reading comics or graphic novels. Like the images, like they struggle to immerse me. Like I really am a visual reader, and so I'm imagining all these images playing out. Plus, I get all this extra description and inner monologue and dialogue, and there's so little of that in graphic novels and manga, and that's what I'm missing so much in these stories. I find it hard to just get immersed and to care about anything that's going on in them, and they end up feeling like really superficial to me. So I tried another one this year that I thought was going to be the one that was going to be like, oh, this one is, if any, is going to work for me. After Shogun, I thought, I'm going to try Vagabond. Like, this is going to be a samurai story set right around the same time. And, like, I thought that was going to crush it for me. And I couldn't get through my first deluxe volume. Like, I DNF'd it. Like, it was just a struggle. Every page was like, oh, like, this is, like, childish, and like it's feeling like just like maybe it's a bit of the translation or just the style that I could not get into it. But
Jake suggests you should
okay,
try
I will
something.
say in my younger years I did read The Watchmen and loved it, and that felt like it was a deep story, and I was able to get immersed in that. So maybe I do need something more literary to try. But like these manga just are not doing it for me. And so I tried Vagabond Volume 1. That's going to be one of my most disappointing ones because I thought that was going to be like, ooh, that's how I'm going to get into manga through this one. And it just did not work for me at all. I did not find it to be like realistic enough for me. Like it felt cartoonish, and I wasn't able to suspend disbelief, I think, and get immersed in the stories.
It is like, okay, I haven't read manga, but I've watched a good deal of anime when I was younger, and my family members I have a whole bunch of manga like obsession people who are obsessed with manga in my family. So I'm kind of like osmosis exposed to it a decent amount, and I feel like it's just very, very different storytelling style, and the tropes are very, very different. And I think that can be pretty jarring because it is usually a bit more over the top, from what I understand. Like I think you can have more serious stories, but even then, like a lot of it is, like it's just like very over the top. And sometimes,
I mean, the beginning of Berserk and Vagabond are very serious. But like, I think you're right. That over the topness of it clashes with the seriousness of the story for me. And I know that is a me problem because I see so many people really getting invested in these, in One Piece, in Vagabond, in Berserk, in a way that I just have not been able to, which is a failing on my part, me just clashing with this medium more than anything. But I did not like Vagabond nearly as much as I thought I would. It was the DNF. That was one of my worst reads of the year. But the one that I read all the way through, that was my most disappointing read. Came on the heels of enjoying book one, but not falling in love. Wanting to love it, but not falling in love. And then liking the movies, also not falling in love with them. And then we tried book two, Dune
Oh,
Messiah, and
that's what I want. I wanted a spicy take. Thank you, Ben.
I found this to be terribly boring. Like, I think a lot of it was intellectually interesting. Like, there's a lot of philosophizing going on in the characters' internal monologues or in the dialogue. There's like a lot of deep themes that are being dealt with. It felt like, though, that I was getting these themes and delivered through like just characters that were author mouthpieces. Like I didn't completely like get immersed in Dune in the first book, but I felt like the characters existed as their own entities, and that did not carry through to Dune Messiah. Like these felt like more cardboard mouthpieces, and there wasn't that much like plot to get into here. There's not a lot of things happening. It's a little bit of spinning its wheels, setting things up for the next books. I struggle to see why many people love this. Like, I do, honestly. Like, I'm surprised. Like, I was trying to appreciate it. I was trying so hard. And I just would find myself, like, needing to force myself to read. It's like I just wasn't immersed and the writing wasn't grabbing me. And so I had to do that thing. It wasn't like the effortless reading that is almost 99% of what happens when I open a book. I'm just brought in. It was like just forcing myself to read the next paragraph, the next page, and hoping it was going to get compelling or interesting. Like, there's a really cool thing. There's a cool moment. There's like a cool, very moment at the end. And when I've seen people rave about the book, often they mention like that moment at the end. And I think that is a heavy bias. That's a common psychological bias of weighting things that happen towards the end of an experience. That's kind of what we remember the most clearly when we finish something, is like what was happening towards the end of that. And I do think maybe that's what happens a lot with this book. I hated the reading experience of Dune Messiah. I will say, though, that I was not in love with the whole plotting and the setting even. Like, I was not in love with Dune Part 1, either for the books or the movies. I was liking it, kind of, but for people who are just like super fans of book one, I could easily see them being all in on just like the continuation. But as someone who was not all in on book one, this really struggled to capture my attention.
I've only read book one, which I enjoyed. I would not say like it changed my life or anything, but I mean, it is one of those things where like you just try to keep in mind that it came out a long time ago and it was like revolutionary at that time, and some of these ideas were just like crazy, mind blowing when they came out. And then obviously a lot of our favorite sci-fi fantasy books now are built on top of the ideas that were explored in Dune. And I mean, with sci-fi, I think there's always that balance of like, sometimes you'll find like there's a continuum with sci-fi books, right, where it's like very idea driven or very like story and character driven. And definitely I think most fantasy readers like myself, we tend to fall on that story character driven side, but there's a strong contingent of sci-fi readers, and like I have friends like this who literally only read sci-fi books just because they're interested in the ideas. Like they don't care much about storytelling. They're like, oh, here's a neat idea. Well, like, I don't know, like what would the world be like if like this random thing happened? And from what I gather, though I haven't read past book one of Dune, it seems like Herbert went farther and farther towards that side.
Yeah, I definitely think so. At least comparing book one to book two, like there was a lot of compelling plot drama in book one, and that's almost just not at all what book 2 is like in any way, shape, or form. It's so different from book 1.
I've heard it gets
And
weirder and weirder. So
yeah, definitely. I'm kind of just like interested to see how weird it gets. Like I kind of want to continue, but I just need to give it more time, maybe away from, so I just completely forget what Dune Messiah was like. Because I know there's a bit of a time jump, I think. So as we get away from this, like, this honestly was just a complete failure as a continuation of the Paul story for me. On the idea front, I could get into an idea-driven story. So, like, I love the 3-body problem and that whole Remembrance vs. Past trilogy. That's very idea-centric. And I haven't read too much sci-fi in this vein, but some Ted Chiang stories, like, I can get into it, especially if the ideas, I find them interesting and compelling. This failed for me on the ideas front. Like,
you'll hate the later books.
probably. I was talking to Chris Verrocchio about this because he's a Dune fanatic. He loves the first 4 books, but he himself has a lot of criticisms of the coherence of Herbert's thematic vision for the series. We are told, sorry, spoilers for Dune and Dune Messiah, or like the time in between Dune and Dune Messiah. We are told that Paul Atreides was some Hitler-like genocidal figure as the Emperor of the Fremen, that after he becomes kind of leader of the Fremen and successfully like deposes the Emperor and takes over Arrakis, that he goes off screen, off page, and is just like going around the galaxy and committing genocide everywhere he goes, and responsible for like billions and billions of deaths. And Herbert's supposed thematic takeaway is that, like, you know, even someone who's like has his intentions in the right place, like Paul, like if you're are charismatic and you become a leader and you get people to follow you, like that'll have bad effects. Like
power corrupts kind of thing.
Like that to me, in theory, when you say that idea out loud, like that's interesting, but we don't get that on the page. And Rocky will say the same thing. It's like he doesn't show Paul actually being a bad person or corrupting those under his rule. Like he is an honorable person and an honorable ruler, and his followers like respect him. Like it feels like Herbert had this thematic premise, or this ideas premise, and then the characters he created and the character he created in Paul is the exact situations. Like it didn't fully fit his premise, but he just went with it anyway. And like there's a clash between, I think, his ultimate message and what we see on the page and like what we get. And it's very strange. And
yeah, that's a harsh critique.
It is, and I wasn't positive about like whether that was at all valid until I brought this up with Rockio and I got to chat with him on my channel, and he was right with me, and that's his major critique, and it's almost what inspired him to write Sun Eater. Like, you know, what if there's someone who's a problematic, charismatic leader, but you know, the dark things they have to do are actually kind of sacrificial and needed for, you know, our survival and for overcoming greater evil. And I think Sun Eater is more successful in terms of having coherent kind of thematics than Dune, for that reason. And so and we get it all on the page with Sun Eater. The most important changes and turns happen between books 1 and 2 for Paul, and then the supposed butcher, the genocidal maniac, is just not who is here in Dune and Messiah. It was not believable, honestly. Yeah. Like I was just like, what did they say happened between the books? Like, like it just didn't make sense. So
okay. Okay, so we got
Yeah.
your that's your worst least favorite book of the year, I'd say.
Yep, pretty easily because I had a great year. I did not have many books that were just like awful, horrible reads. Like in previous years, I've had worse reads than this. Like Brandon Sanderson's own graphic novel, White
Right.
Sand, was a misery for me. I combined a medium I don't love with a very, very lackluster story. Um, and the first binding, it was a similar type of slog where I was bored, but that was like 4 times the size. And so I had much more negativity towards the first binding. It was also a
Nice.
story where I could really see its potential, but the flaws were so glaring to me that they were pissing me off so much. Whereas this one, I was like, it's short, it's like a classic. I I do see like what he was going for, and there were aspects or moments that I still admired here and there.
Nice.
So not terrible. I am curious though for your worst reads of the year.
Worst reads. Yeah, it's funny, right? Because I think the most disappointing book, almost by definition, you have to be hyped up for it. Like if you're going into a book expecting that it's gonna be bad, then like whatever, it's probably not going to be the most disappointing book of the year. So I have four on this list, and to be honest, these are kind of spicy takes. So
Ooh.
because I know that you've
Oh,
enjoyed some of these books.
okay. We'll end on a positive note because I do want to circle back to your favorite books, both the Lynch ones and the mystery favorite books. So we'll end on the positive. We'll
Sure,
dive
sure.
into the negative since I've already gotten into my least favorite books of the year here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So anyway, negative books. So okay. These are popular books, which is why I was like so excited to read like each one of these. I was really excited for, and then each one was just like a complete letdown. So okay, the first one is Jade
Ooh, I'm
City and Jade
excited.
War,
Oh wow.
which, like I said, man, these are spicy takes, right? Because like it's
Oh, you are
probably
not lying about the spiciness of the take.
oh man, it's
Oh
probably like
man.
one of the most popular series on BookTube, and this is gonna sound so mean.
Go
And
for it. Absolutely.
oh
Let
my
loose.
god,
This is your
oh,
experience. Let loose.
okay, so please, I don't mean to be as mean as I am because I know
Let
Fondly
loose.
a lovely person, but I don't know if I've ever read writing that is more bland than the Greenbone Saga. Like bland is like the word that comes to mind, where it's literally just so boring. Like like you're in a scene and she'll pull you out and describe some random thing about the world, and it's just done in like, okay,
All right,
thanks.
I'm right with you. I thought the omniscient world building interludes
Yeah,
were
yeah,
so unnecessary and immersion breaking. They added so little to the overall story, and like the rest of the story is in very close third person limited. It's like
yeah.
there was no framing device either. It was just like random author insert on the world building.
Jake is offering me a clean plate.
Like okay, I want to interrupt you here. You can continue to rant. I will agree. The prose style is on the bland side, like the Sanderson Gwynn side of the modern fantasy spectrum, where it's not trying to really be flourish like to it really is trying to be that Sanderson style. Like the thing that she's focusing on is
It's very like
the
straightforward.
characters like inner lives, their conflicts, and the plot, and like and the action, and like it's and so like if you are not fully immersed in what's going on with the character drama or the action, it's very easy to see you being disappointed by the writing. And I had the same experience actually with R.F. Kuang's Poppy War trilogy. I think Kuang, the writing, the prose quality was worse than Lee's, but
Mm.
it was. I think I had a similar experience with what you're describing with the Greenbone books that I had with Poppy War. But like Lee, besides those interludes, the writing was doing the job enough for me. I found the story and the character drama compelling enough where I was not noticing the writing.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's why I was able to have a good time with those
yeah.
books.
The thing is, like, um, I think if you use that kind of writing style in normal fantasy, it does not fly. Like for instance, if you were writing a book set in a world similar to like Lord of the Rings or something, you can't use that writing style. Like it,
Yeah,
I would like
yeah,
I would literally like throw your book away. Like that's just
yeah,
completely unacceptable.
yeah,
On the Lee's case, like okay, her world is more modern, so it
yeah.
makes
It's like
sense.
1980s our
Right.
world. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So it's like it's fine, it's forgivable. But like there's just something else apart from style where just the way she writes
Hmm.
is just so boring and like to the point where like I get it, man. I get it. Like there's these characters and I suppose they're kind of cool, but I could not care less. Like I was like
to her
slogging
to
through
her credit,
it. But
I thought her use of word choice for the world building elements around the clans and the jade magic, I thought some of that was really cool, like
yeah.
the names of the different positions within the clans and the names of certain like traditions and like certain jargon that the clans people would throw around. Like I thought some of that she was really good at coming up with the in-world jargon.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Like
And I think like it's not like this series doesn't have redeeming qualities. Like I definitely see why people love it so much. I think like one of the things I really liked in Jade War in book two, like I only read books one and two, and I kept trying to tell myself like you're not bored, you just don't know how to read because these books are so popular that surely they're actually good. But then I realized afterwards that no, I was actually just bored. But one of the things I liked about Jade War was just the way she explored like immigrant communities in other countries and stuff like that. And some of the international things that happened in that book were really cool. So, you know, like there were a lot of redeeming features, but I think overall, I just I was disappointed because BookTube had hyped it up so much for me,
yeah,
and I was like, this is
yeah,
going to be my
it
favorite.
is one of those big series. So what's interesting about this is I think you for the modern fantasy fandom, if we're thinking of like readers on a spectrum with how much they care about prose quality and depth and like lack of subtlety and that sort of thing, like you are pretty far on one side of the spectrum of being a prose snob, of caring about word choice and rhythm and elegance and I think that they're more so than in the reading public at large. It's like I think people who read a lot of classics or literary fiction often care more about that, or who read poetry, or like that is a world like the poetry world. Like they're as far onto that side of the spectrum as you can get. Like that's almost 99% of what it's all about
Right.
is like the carefulness of each individual word choice and the sound and the rhythm and so like you are closer, far closer to that side of the spectrum than I would say the majority of readers in modern fantasy. And I think that there is a large chunk, probably by far the majority of readers in modern fantasy who I'd say almost actively don't necessarily care about prose quality,
Yeah.
even like a little bit. Like that their concerns really are like they want characters that they can love or love to hate, or they just love going on these archetypical journeys, or love the romances in these books, or like think about romance readers,
Yeah.
like they're there for these juicy romances and or like there's a lot of aspects of these stories that I think um, particularly in modern fantasy that the majority of readers are not caring that much about this aspect.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
I think that you're likely to find a bunch of things that are hugely hyped up in the fandom that you might not like because of that.
yeah. I think I'm starting to discover that, and it's not. I don't think it's a good thing, personally, to be a pro snob. Like it, there's something to be said about just enjoying the story, right? But for me, um, when the writing choices are like that, it feels like the world never feels immersive, right? Like, but
Mhm.
if the style, if the Yeah, like basically, if the prose isn't cohesive and strong and gives a sense of atmosphere, then I don't care much about the world, which makes it much harder to stay invested in the plot and to stay invested in the characters. If the characters' dialogue is clunky and like rough, then like they're not real. So I could not care less about them essentially, and
Yeah. So
that's like my
your
experience.
threshold for feeling the realness of a character is just a lot higher than I think most readers in the fantasy fandom. Like, I think that's a reality that you're dealing with. Like, because and it's definitely higher than mine, because I was able to get immersed and feel like the Greenbond characters were real for me.
Hmm.
They're not my favorite books of all time, but I did get into it.
Yeah,
Besides those omniscient interludes, I think like they were so dumb and
yeah,
misplaced.
those were extra bad. I have to admit.
But they didn't come up that often though, and so I was able to pretty much just like burn through them and be like, that was a waste, and just like ignore them.
Yeah.
I'm also able to, I think, somewhat ignore aspects of books that I don't love if enough is working for me.
Mhm.
So like I was able to like be pissed off at those interludes and just let it go. Be like, I'm gonna pretend basically like that's they're not in there. They're not gonna get in the way of me enjoying the rest of it. Whereas it seems like you are not as able to like let certain negative aspects necessarily go.
I'm a douchebag, man. Like I grab onto the negative and I just don't let it go, and I'm like, oh, and then it just becomes hate reading for the rest of it. But I mean, you look at a book like Lies Block Lamora, right?
Mhm.
It's like the writing is just such a pleasure to read. Like forget the fact that this book does literally everything perfectly, right? Like I okay. To be fair,
I
I know that you don't love this book. Okay, I know.
if you just held up Red Seas Under Red Skies,
Okay,
I'd
all
be
right.
like right with you. I'd be right with you. Yeah.
But I mean,
There we
it's
go.
just
There we go.
it's like Scott Lynch's writing style is so compelling on its own. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I could just read whatever this guy is writing. I like who cares like about the characters in the plot? Like
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
I just
The
wanna like
man has a way with words. Yeah.
I want to listen to his words. I want to like, read his words. So I know
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
always interesting, like people the different things that affect different readers in different ways.
But
So
like, so yeah, we got to get to your other but like, so Jade City and Jade War, you didn't end up finishing the series.
no, I still
Yeah.
have Jade Legacy left. I was
Yeah.
thinking maybe I'll push through and do it on audio, because I think potentially like trying to do physical reads with them was making things worse. But
Yeah, if you're yeah, that's I was doing it mostly by audio. I think the narrator's pretty good with it. And yeah, I think you'll notice the bland prose or clunky prose less in audio. So I value closure. Like I would have very difficult time reading 2/3 of a trilogy and then not following through and reading that third one. I don't know if you feel the same way.
yeah,
Even if you didn't love it.
I do feel the same way. So it bugs me, but I just like the problem is I after Jade War, it felt like I was on the verge of a reading slump. Like
Yeah.
if I read Jade Legacy right then, like I'd be done.
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
just
yeah.
throw away all my books
Yeah,
and be
yeah.
like, I'm done reading. But I mean,
I did. I think Jade Legacy was solid. Jade War was my favorite of the three,
they collect
but
narrative.
like Jade Legacy, a lot happens and like there's these huge time skips. So like I think the pacing of it, like it wouldn't take you that long probably to listen to it and be
Yeah.
carried through to the end, and you'd at least get to the end and see what happens. And I think where things end up was pretty interesting. So
Mm.
it'd be, even if you didn't love it, I think getting the closure would be good.
Yeah, yeah.
And trying the audio, because people love the narrator. I didn't. I liked him. By the third book, I think I was on board with Kishino fully.
Nice.
He was solid. He was solid with it.
Okay.
Jake is a huge fan of Andrew Kishino, the narrator. But he gets a lot of love from a lot of people. I think people vibe with it. Did you listen to the Gentleman
Yeah, there you
Bastards
go.
books?
I did. Yeah, that was
So
exceptional.
Michael Page, that's another one where the marriage
Mm.
between the personality, like the sensibility of the narrator matches the sensibility of the author.
Yeah.
Where like, yeah,
It works so well. And like So okay, you might be able to tell, but I'm not that much of a book collector with my complete lack of books
Mhm.
behind me. So I tend to only buy books once I've read them digitally
Yeah.
or by
Yeah.
audio. So like when I do buy a book, it's one that I really like. So after I bought this one, I ended up spending like almost like 3.5 hours just sitting there reading it because I was like, oh man,
Oh.
like I almost reread it, man. I almost did a DCC thing. That's,
Man, I may not have loved like the second half of Lies of Locke Lamora. Like I kind of ran out of steam with that very particular plotting and the mystery and the flashbacks, and like it was working for me for a while. Like the stuff in the beginning when Locke is younger and
yeah.
like getting raised in the by Father Chains with the other boys, like that was great. Like I loved definitely like huge chunks of Lies of Locke Lamora. Um, so
You,
yeah,
you, my friend, need to read this guy.
I do. I do. Oh my god. Yes. I've heard that he's on the verge of publishing more. And so this is a great time
And
actually to get back into Gentleman Bastards. And
yeah,
I got something happened that has never happened for me before. I think. Maybe it has. But if I've turned sour on something, I rarely turn around more positive on it. And like I was into Lies of Locke Lamora for a while. Like I said, like I don't know, something happened like midway through. I just lost steam with that book, and I did not expect to get fully invested in the series. But Red Seas Under Red Skies blew me away 2 years ago in 2023. One of my
was
favorite
like,
books of that year, and I
so
finally saw what everyone was saying about this wonderful duo of Locke and Jean, and I like their duo really came alive in that book as an
yeah,
actual like interesting friendship, and the mystery plot of book 2 really worked for me. And once we got on the ship, like I was so invested in the crew and what happened, and like was not expecting a really intense naval battle scene, and like I
yeah.
was so into it. And so like I rarely ever been soured on something and then got turned around because I'm like I kind of had a bias against it, but I loved it. He turned me around, and once I was invested in the actual like plotting and the characters, I then was appreciating the actual prose more and his
Mhm.
cleverness and the humor. And I think that was getting in the way of me enjoying the writing and the cleverness in book 1.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think now that I'm fully on board, I'm ready to continue with Public of Thieves. Was
Okay,
that your number 3 book of the year? No, no,
it wasn't.
no, no.
But okay, so I mean, like Red Seas on the Red Skies ended up being my favorite of the three so far, and I feel like the Republic of Thieves gets more hate than it deserves. I think it's a really, really good book. Like I honestly think you're going to like it a lot. So I'll leave it at
Nice,
that.
nice. No,
Okay, wait.
Andrew said he DNF'd. The duo was not there halfway through book 1. Like it's not like people that talk about the duo of Locke and John, I think, have always read at least through book 2. Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't just read Lies of Locke Lamora and be raving about this great duo
Mhm.
of Locke and John. Like there's just not that much development of them as a duo in the first book.
He is referring to Gentleman Bastards, or is it Greenbone? Because we were just talking
Um,
about Greenbone, but I'm assuming it's Gentleman Bastards, which is just heretic, and I don't like you, Andrew, anymore. I'm kidding. You're great.
Probably Gentleman Bastards, I
Probably.
imagine. Greenbone
And
Saga would be GBS. I think.
Andrew tends to hate
Maybe.
our favorite books, like this one. But anyway.
Andrew's right. Like people do praise like they praise the book Lies of Locke Lamora and then talk about the duo. Yeah, that is erroneous when people do that. Like they should not be talking about the duo if they're just talking about Lies of Locke Lamora. If they're talking about the full series, that's more warranted. But it should come with a disclaimer that you should not expect some awesome duo to be the centerpiece of book 1. Like it should always come with that disclaimer, because if you go into a book with an expectation like that and it's not being met, like it's this weird disappointment that'll happen based on expectations.
And now he's hitting on Hob. Now him and Nico are teaming up on us.
Andrew, it's okay. You and Nico missed the part of our chat where we were raving about the whole Fist in the Pool trilogy. We don't have to rehash that.
No,
We've
it's okay.
covered our love
You know
or
what?
fits in the pool.
Now that the two kings of negativity are in the chat, why don't we continue with the worst books of 2024?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
okay,
You missed, Andrew and Nika. You missed me really trashing Dune Messiah. So that was my worst read of
there's something special.
2024. And did we get to your worst read of 2024? Was Jade City or
No,
Jade War the worst? No.
no. Okay, I'm building up to it, man. I'm building up to it. You just wait. So this next one. So this is. So I have two more on my most disappointing
Ooh.
list, and they're both kind of spicy. And I think this next one might be the spiciest take, and I'm kind of scared to say it, but
It was
I
not. Hold on. It was not one of the ones that I gave you in our TBR, my
no,
TBR picks. So
no.
you liked all three of those:
Yeah,
Song
they
of
were good.
Achilles, Becoming a Druid,
Becoming a Druid.
and Magicians. We liked all those. Okay, so my TBR swap for you was a success.
It was absolutely a success. The next one for me was the Sword of Kayin. Didn't quite work.
Yeah. That is a spicy take I very much approve of, because I also read that. I guess I read that in 2023 at this point, but somewhat recently. It's very fresh, and I was very surprised based on the hype in the community. I really was kind of surprised at what we got in there. Like, I was let down. Like, I think that is part of what I was talking about the hype came from the portion of the fantasy reading fandom that is very much not concerned with prose and is like just loves getting wrapped up in like messy main characters and messy character drama. Like, that is the hype from that side of the fantasy reading fandom.
Yeah.
The hype for Kaigen is not from the prose snob, usually like GGK loving like side of the fandom.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think similar issues to the Greenbone books for me. The writing style didn't quite immerse me. I think the dialogue in that book just felt really childish, to be honest.
Yeah.
Even the plot structure, like, okay, the events that happen halfway through that book, like Andrew's right, it's a soul punch. Like it genuinely was like whoa.
Yeah,
And
that
like I was
whole action battle sequence
like
was amazing.
excellent.
I loved that. That's one of my favorite action set pieces. Actually, I did think I read this year. Early this year. That's one of my favorite overall like fantasy action sequences and battle set pieces I've read. Like, that was really well done. And it was a soul punch at the end. That was the character I was most invested in. And I thought that was like our main character we were following, but really the whole time the main character was Misaki, who I was not fully jiving with as a character. And and it seems like the love for this book comes with people who are just like 100% fully, totally in love with the character drama of Misaki and like things that are going on in her inner life and interpersonal conflicts and relationship with her husband. And like, that takes center stage in the last part of the book. And like, that's a cool chapter where there's this big dual confrontation. And like, so I got the Kickstarter edition before I actually read it.
That's a pretty book.
I probably am gonna sell it though, because I didn't love the book. Where is it? I don't know. That's alarming.
You lost. Yeah, so Andrew here is trying to hit me right in my heart, and he's saying the last argument of kings is a I'm assuming he means fulfilling story. And the thing is, Andrew, it's not a fulfilling story, but it's an excellent book. You know, it doesn't have to be fulfilling to be excellent, if you ask me. But anyway,
where is my
Kaigen? Jake bounced off sort of Kaigen. I mean, I'm glad to hear Blood Over Bright Haven that you like that one better.
I wanna try that one. I think that has more promise for me. But like, there's this great chapter that everyone raves about, and it was great. But like, I don't think the character drama with the marriage at the heart of the book really ended up feeling organic or working for me. And that does work for a lot of readers, and hits really hard. And that I think is why it gets so much love.
Yeah, and like that's the thing is
But
like after
if you can overlook the clunkiness in the writing, like there's some of the most clunky info dumping I've ever read in this book that was so unnecessary. And
like the units of
and
time, like the world building
oh, and
felt
the units of time just like horrible. Like
yeah.
that
World
that was
building,
taking me out of all these moments of just like, what does this word mean again? Like
yeah.
like
Yeah.
there
I
was
mean
like
that's
that was hard for me. That was hard for me to look past, honestly. Like it was annoying me so much, that little thing about like these time units. Like it was so annoying. Um
yeah.
yeah, what is
No. And okay, they're
what's
still
he
hating
talking
on
about?
Abercrombie. They're still hating on
They're hitting
Abercrombie.
on
I can't
Last
stand
Argument
Abercrombie.
of Kings. That's
So
crazy.
unacceptable. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It is. I will admit, it is maybe one of the most divisive books
Yeah.
I've ever seen. Like so many people who absolutely hate it, and then other people like me who adore it. But anyway, speaking of books that I dislike, because it's not about me, of
Mhm.
course. So Sword of Hygiene, like after that first half for me, it didn't hit like I it was good for the first half, 50% mark. It peaked, and after that, like it's got a very interesting plot structure, which is fine. That's cool. But I think what actually happened, I just ended up not caring much and like lost
Yeah.
interest towards the end. I was like, yeah, this, and also like I don't. It just felt kind of weird, like without going into
Yeah.
spoilers. Like I don't know about this relationship. Like this doesn't
Yeah, no, it did. It did.
right. Like,
The marriage, like the husband character, I don't think was particularly coherent and
good night,
realistic
Andrew.
in
Thanks for
any
joining.
way. Yeah, thanks for stopping by. That was fun.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
A lot of the drama of the last half has to do with that husband character,
Yeah.
and I don't think that character was executed well enough throughout the book for that to land.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It does work for a lot of people, and like you hear people raving like Misaki, one of the best characters in fantasy. Man, I just did not see it, and I think the writing quality actually did get in the way of my enjoyment of it a little bit for that one too. I still overall was positive on the book because I did like the Mamoru POV character a lot. I did love that middle action sequence. Aspects of the ending were working for me. I was not as negative on it as you, but I was disappointed because for years I'd been hearing that this is like the shining example of like a fantasy standalone, epic fantasy standalone, and like just like one of the greatest modern fantasy works of literature, a masterpiece. And I was expecting to be just like fully blown away, knocked my socks off, like
It's overhyped.
the same way I was with the GGK standalones, but it was not to be.
It's not to be. But I mean, like I do appreciate, like I feel bad because it's also an indie book. So it's like, but I do appreciate that it's brought a lot of light to indie books. So in that sense, like I'm very grateful to Emma Wong's accomplishment.
Yeah, one of the original big indie fantasy hits. Like I think it did win Spiffbo before Spiffbo was like
I think it did,
a really popular thing in the consciousness.
Yeah.
And
okay.
Yeah.
Can I tell you my least favorite book of the year?
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so this was I don't have a copy of it because I would not buy this book, but it was We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle.
Oh, interesting. I have a copy I got on sale. I have not read it. It. Where is it? Go for it. You talk about it.
I mean, I don't know, similar problems where this felt like Abercrombie, like he was trying to emulate Abercrombie, and it just fell so far short that it was almost insulting.
Don't love hearing that.
But, yeah, I don't know, man. Like like nothing about this book really worked for me. There are. How do I even get into this without going into spoilers? But
I mean, go minor spoilers. It's a book one, so there's a limit to how much I can be spoiled on the series here.
Yeah, I mean, just the characters were just there's like the thing about how the characters can be very annoying, and a lot of the time, like you don't want to read about annoying characters, but then I feel like sometimes people overuse that phrase. I found these characters to be exceptionally annoying, and the problem is he's very Sandersonian in the sense that there is no subtext whatsoever. So these characters are like complaining about the same things again and again and again, and it's just so repetitive. and like
Oh,
just want to make me like
oh
and
man.
rip my hair out.
Yeah,
And it's
that's
like I get it.
yeah.
Like you're in a really rough situation. I get it. I get that you're scared. I get it. You don't need to tell me over and over and over again.
No.
You could have told me once at the beginning of the book. I would have understood right off the bat. You don't have to show me that the character is brave and like is doing brave things. I get that they're scared. I will forgive them for being flawed. You just don't need to tell me again and again and again that they're scared.
Ooh.
Right? Like so in that sense, really bad. Writing style felt very short, very pedestrian. And then there's like some plot things where like a character gets like brutally injured and you're like, okay, they're dead. And then they just walk up and like get up and walk away from it, no problem. And that happens like at least once that I can remember. But you know, stuff like that. Like also maybe like the worst audio narration I've ever heard.
Ooh.
So don't do this in audio. But yeah, so yeah,
Yikes.
that was I think my most disappointing.
Actually, that's where audio could actually hurt the experience is if you have whiny characters. Like
and like a whiny narration, it's not a good mix.
oh,
And that's pretty much
Ooh.
exactly what we got.
Oh boy.
Point.
Oh no.
And like it's disappointing because it's so overhyped. Like I was like, yeah, man, everyone's saying if you love Abercrombie, you got to read like The Last War. And so I was so hyped going into it, and then I ended up being disappointed. So
yikes. All right. Yeah, it's not high on my TBR. I have many hundreds of books that I'm more excited to get to than this. So this is low. It's very, very we'll see if I ever get to it. Most likely not at this point because I have many years worth of stuff I'm legitimately like very excited about. So good warning. Good warning.
I would love for you to read it so we can rant about it together.
Yeah,
but I mean, you may end up loving it, so who knows?
It's always possible. It's very possible to disagree. A personal pet peeve is like very like whiny, repetitively complaining characters. Like that it usually just grates on me. So
yeah, Nico's saying.
Interestingly, the first two books are like the same size.
Nico, I feel like Andrew just has polar opposite tastes compared to me, unfortunately.
What is going on? The first two books are like the same size, and the third book.
Jeez.
This is the third book. What is going? This is like I know it's a different size paperback, but like it's funny that it's also a different size. Like this is the same series. This thing is just such a big chunker compared to books 1 and 2. Cool covers. I really like this cover. That's very cool. The covers stand out definitely. This one in particular, but yeah, that's not promising for the actual story.
I mean, like here's the thing. I think I was maybe too harsh because Heidi loved it. A lot of other people loved it. It just didn't click for me for whatever reason. But yeah.
Wow, DNFing the third book of a trilogy. That's intense, man. Once you're that far, like for me, there's too much sunk cost of my time and mental energy and investment. Like no matter what, I'm finishing that out. So yeah, that's savage to DNF in the middle of the third book of a trilogy. All right, well, I love the spicy take. I wish I had more spicy takes for you with what I didn't really like.
You got to read more bad books, man. That's
this
what
was
you gotta do.
Like the ones that I read that didn't even make my top 10 list. Like the 12 book Alex Vera series was solid for me. Urban fantasy, I was into that. Some of the early books that were a little weaker, but they were still okay. I've read like 10 of the Vorkosigan books. Like I love that.
Yeah, we buddy read a couple of those together, which was great fun.
And that series is really working for me. Just spectacular reading year for me. Like consistently loving what I was reading.
Yeah, I think Nico has a point. Like you gotta embrace the DNF at some point.
Yeah, it's true with mountains of books to read that could work for us. It really is a shame if you are pushing through something that you're not liking. But like, there is always a chance that it could turn around for you. Like, if I didn't continue Gentleman Bastards, I wouldn't have found Red Seas Under Red Skies, which I loved.
That's the
risk. It's
right?
probably more rare though that if you're hating a book individually, an individual book, that like continuing it would turn around for you. Like that's probably very rare. I don't know that I've ever had that experience with an individual book. Once I've soured on it, but this is great. I love hearing those spicy takes. I want more. This is like you can carve out a niche on BookTube with like there's probably lots of people who feel like they're in some tiny silent minority of like being weird because they didn't like the Greenbone Saga or Sword of Kaigen. And when I gave my monthly wrap up on Sword of Kaigen and I mentioned having some issues with it, like I was still giving it like 4 stars or 4.5 stars. Like I forget what I gave it. I was overall positive on it, but I qualified it with a few negatives. There were a bunch of people in the comments that were happy that I was like less than fully praising of that book. Like that it's like there's definitely a niche for you to carve out on BookTube. It's like I said, like the vast majority of the fandom is like much less concerned with subtext and prose quality and some of the things you are concerned with, and so you could definitely carve out a niche for yourself. But like I can't remember. Have you read any of the Malazan books yet?
No, I need to get
so
on
like
that.
So I think there's like a 100% chance, like a literal 100% chance that you will like them. I don't know if you will become like, I can't predict if it's going to be like, you're going to be one of those people that's like, this is definitely one of my all-time favorites, or like me, where like, I loved it, but not as much as like my really favorite stuff. I think there's basically 100% chance though, that you are positive on it and that you get a lot out of it. I think there's a very good chance that you love them.
Nice.
And because Erikson, he came from a background of being in literary fiction and poetry, and like he is all for modern fantasy is like on that side of the spectrum of like caring about subtext and being subtle and not being too obvious. So like most people that bounce off of Erikson are like, man, there's just not enough in here that situates the reader, because like he gives you so little of like a lot of characters' internal thoughts and feelings about the situation, and like not a lot of info dumps to situate you in this like complex world and political situation, and like you're thrown into a lot of the middle of these conflicts and things. It's like what people complain about are things that I don't really think you'd have an issue with, and I think his care with language and just oodles of subtext, I think you'll really vibe with. And so I'm excited for you, especially because I know you love Ralph Lister and Michael Page, and Lister does the first 3 books. I really think he was the perfect narrator for Malazan. This is a tangent. I hope you have time tonight. I don't have any.
Yeah. Let's go for it, man.
Lister was that perfect marriage of sensibilities with the author. Like he got the exact vibe and emotions and tone of what Erikson was going for, I think. And Erikson has like millions of characters, and Lister is a magician with being able to do distinctive voices for like hundreds of different characters. Michael Page, on the other hand, takes over. There is like no information out there that is publicly available. Like in the age of the internet, it is so frustrating when you want to find out something that happened and why it happened and what's the inside scoop, like what's gossip. Like it was so frustrating. I tried to find out what happened. Why was there this narrator switch? What is the scoop behind this? I can find out nothing. But for some reason, that's unfortunate. It might just be some bureaucratic business decision that some audiobook rights company, production company was making. Who knows? But Lister was taken off Malazan, and Michael Page was put on it for House of Chains book 4 going forward. And I don't know why I'm pointing to random books over here. So like Lister did first 3, and then Michael Page does the next 7, and that was weird. Like, to be so immersed with Lister for 3 books. Like, book 4, very
It's great.
weird, shifting to, oh, thanks, Jake, to a different narrator, and like, that was very strange. Michael Page does not have as much variety to the different voices he does compared to Lister. It was very weird.
So
I do think Page found a new like rhythm with it at Midnight Tides, because that changes continents, fully new characters, and so like he was able to make stuff his own here.
yeah,
And then he got, I think, more into the Malazan feel going forward. But between like so besides the weird switch in book 4, the audio narration is superb. And the writing, I think, is going to be up your alley in terms of style.
nice.
And it's going to feel deep and interesting and lots of like epic story beats and so I'm excited. I think this could be a huge hit for you.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to read it. I bought this humble bundle of like all the Malazan books. There's like 20 books or something on my Kindle now, so I will read it. But I always thought that it was one of those series that you want to read in print, not on audio, because it might be kind of dense. But I know that you have mentioned before that the audio ended up being okay for you.
Oh, I mean, great. And I would say though that the combo was what was the magic for me. Like, doing it immersively was like, Lister brings it to life so well in the first book and like the first 3 books. Honestly, like, I didn't want to miss out on what he was delivering. And so like, but just doing audio is tough for it, especially getting your bearings with like the names and the world building and yeah, like his overall style. Yeah, it's more similar to like GGK's style of like, everything's not fully obvious, like what's being implied. Like, you have to think about it sometimes. And so like, you'll have to wonder like, oh, maybe you could interpret this line a few different ways, or like, oh, what is this referring to exactly? Or like, does it have multiple meanings? Like, that'll happen. And so if you're doing it in print, you have the freedom to like pause and reread. I don't mind like being active, and like if I'm doing immersively, like I'll stop it. I'll like reread something in print. I'll rewind. Like, I don't mind it being a little messy like that. But probably like doing at least some of it in print or immersively is a good idea, rather
just
than
to
doing
get grounded. That makes sense.
Yeah. But Lister is so captivating with these books. Like, he is truly the perfect narrator for it. It is the biggest shame, and I like Page, that like he was taken off it, because he was just the perfect guy.
Yeah.
But like I said, once you hit book 5 though, like Page, then I was like, okay, this is not horrible. Like, he's doing a great job in his own way.
So book 4 is just a wash. So so okay, we should probably wrap up eventually, but
I wanted to ask you. We have to hear your third favorite book of the year, but go for it. What were you going to ask?
Oh yeah, okay, maybe I'll talk about that. So my third favorite book of the year, which I also don't have, even though I was trying to buy it, but it ended up being really expensive in Canada, was Blackwater by Michael McDowell. And Ben, I think you've been sneaky.
No clue.
I've been talking about this book for a while, man, and you've just been ignoring me. And I'm like, gotta get Ben to read this
horror
book, man.
Like,
I gotta get Ben to read Blackwater, man. I'm telling you.
Pet Sematary just did not work for me. Like, I don't know if horror is gonna work.
Do you trust me?
I trust you. Don't trust me. I trust you.
No, okay. I mean, here's the thing: is like, I think it is a perfect horror novel for fantasy readers, because it's very minimal on the horror elements. When they happen, they feel almost fantasy-ish, and they're not. I mean, okay, I guess they're kind of relevant to the plot, but they're not that central. Like, it's a family drama, right? Like, we're following this one. It's a Southern Gothic family drama. So imagine, over the span of 50 years, we're following this one really rich family in a small town of Alabama, and it is like, yeah, Heidi said Blackwater is Mike's second favorite of the year, and Mike inspired me to pick it up, and I have to say, man, like, it is so freaking good. It is maybe like some of the best character work I've ever read, and I'm telling you, Ben, it might be the best audio narration. Like
Wow,
it
really?
might be a
Did you do
contender.
it? Did you do it fully by audio?
I did it fully by audio.
Oh wow! If
Yeah.
the narration is one of your favorites, like
Oh, it was
you
such a
just
good
you
narration.
just found a cheat code for getting me to
For
try
getting
it.
it on your TBR.
Oh
No,
yeah.
I really think, I genuinely think that it could be a hit for you. And I mean, it's kind of a risky take because I know horror isn't your genre, but like Blackwater is something special. Like
Ooh,
it
okay,
was really
okay. You have gotten it on my TBR. It was not on my TBR. I was resisting
yeah.
because
I know you were resisting.
you've made it onto the TBR with the praise for the audio, and just hearing you talk about it, like if it's not overly horror-ish, then if it's horror for fantasy readers, I think
Yeah,
that could
I
jive
mean,
with me.
it's a family drama. Like it genuinely
Yeah.
is a family drama. It's like you have this family, and this new person somehow comes into the family, and then you just see how that disrupts everything and like completely throws off the power dynamics. Like to be honest, the books it most reminded me of was the Live Ship Traders. Like when I
Oh,
started, even
interesting.
though
Okay, I'm a big live ship fan. I mean, the family drama is not my favorite aspect of live ship or Greenbone Saga, but it is compelling for me. Like it's not
yeah,
my most preferred story style,
yeah,
but it they almost work despite me not loving dealing with so much family drama. Like it's not
okay,
that
okay,
family drama hits close to home. Like
yeah,
and like it's not the most escapist thing in the world. Like live
that's true.
ship does not feel terribly escapist in a
Yeah,
lot of ways. Like it's really intense, and you know, like every if you're in a certain mood, maybe, or if I'm in a certain mood, that could be what I can deal with, or it may be what could be hit emotionally hard.
mhm.
Like
Yeah,
not everything has to be kind of fully getting outside of yourself, or escaping your whole reality or past or identity. Like a lot of my strongest reading experiences before getting into SFF were ones that like hit close to home for various reasons.
mhm.
And so
Yeah,
yeah, I just have not been doing a lot of those types of books in recent years, which is
mhm.
why I'm slightly hesitant. But if it's really good and compelling, if it's telling a compelling story, the narration is great, then it could almost be about anything, and it would probably be a worthwhile time. So you convinced me. You convinced me. You got me.
yeah.
You
I
got
mean,
me.
it's
Is it
got
is it short? It's like a short bunch of books that make up one larger story, right?
yeah, it's like 6 volumes. I think you can buy the audiobook for all of them, and it's like 32 hours or something. So
Oh, okay.
credit worthy in
So it's
that
one
sense.
audiobook. Okay.
Yeah, it's one audiobook. And I read them all as one book. So yeah, I mean you could just try one volume and see if it's for you. And yeah, I mean I just really, so again, it's like it just felt like very realistic
Hmm.
characters over the span of a long period of time. And then like you see
Oh,
like
interesting.
the way
You
that
know, I
like
say I
family
don't want
drama
I say I
and
don't want
stuff.
realistic family drama, but like, did you read Pet Cemetery? I can't remember.
Yeah, we read it
You
together,
did.
man.
You did. Yeah. I like we didn't have that much to say about it during our actual buddy read, so I
Yeah,
like I actually liked the more realistic parts of that in the family drama the most out of
yeah.
that, and it was the clunky horror stuff that felt like it was the supernatural, that was removing the agency of the really organic feeling characters, that which didn't work for me fully. And so like from Blackwater, would you say that the horror supernatural elements have a similar role, or does it feel different than they did in Pet Cemetery?
I think it feels very different personally. I think the horror elements are, there's always a sense of mystery around them, and they do add like a looming sense of sort of dread because you particularly come to care so much about this cast of characters. So then the horror elements are like very close to home, but they're also, it's very hard to describe this without spoilers. But yeah, I mean, I think it's like they're not essential to the story, right? Like
Hmm.
it really is about
They
the
don't.
character.
They're not like a main driver of like what ends up happening,
Yeah, I'd say so.
because like they are in Pet Cemetery, like the supernatural horror elements are like the main driver of like the climactic events
Right.
of like they're pushing everything towards what's happening at the end of that story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
it's
that
not
is
really
not
like
what
that.
happens in Blackwater. Okay. Yeah.
So I don't know.
That
I
that
think you
makes
should
it
give it
more
a shot.
appealing. Yeah.
You should give it a
That makes it
shot.
more appealing. That's a great sell.
Yeah.
That's a great sell. Where would you say like Magicians or Song of Achilles ended
Mm-hmm.
up? I know when we chatted about them, they had I must say on my reread, like this was one of the most impactful reads of my year as a reread. Like I was
Yeah.
blown away by this book. Like the like it hits close to home. Like this is one that hits close to home where like
It does.
I could feel like I identified with the sentiments that Grossman I feel like was having while he was like what he was trying to communicate through the book overall and through these characters. And like it's an example of like one where I I think a lot of people bounce off it because they see that the POV character is like he's not heroic. He's not like someone you'd want to aspire to be. Like if you could change yourself and change into someone more heroic, like it's a lot of the characters in fantasy books. We're used to following them, not someone that maybe is like an embodiment of some of our maybe more negative qualities. Or and I find it actually very compelling to be with characters who challenge me a little bit like that, where it's like, you know, would I be reacting in a similar way here? You know, or would I be more heroic or honorable or less whiny? Or this is interesting because a lot of people complain about the whininess, but I don't actually, when I read this book, get a sense of like, oh, this is a very like whiny complaining character. Like I don't know, I'm just I feel like these characters are organic and that they have depth and they're multifaceted. And the fact that they are in this fantasy world but haven't found it isn't the magic elixir to fixing everything inside of them is really interesting and compelling. So I don't know. This I was super happy with my reread of this
Yeah,
one.
that was funny, right? Because you told me to read it, and then pretty much like the day I started, you started reading it as well, rereading it as well, I should say.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, like Nico's saying here, he's heard very mixed things about the magicians. And I will never forget the chat that you had with Kyle about the magician. I think that's the funniest thing. Um,
I
I
will say like he reads extremely fast. So like I he will like listen to books at like 3 times speed, basically. Like like this is not a book to either read or listen to that quick. Like some books, like they benefit from going through them a
slowing
little
down.
bit more slowly, of like absorbing them more deliberately. Because like if you let yourself get immersed into books and like POV characters who are not immediately likable, I think it can take a little bit more effort on our part to do that. But you can then fully inhabit, I think, a character or the author's vision in a way that you maybe couldn't if you are speeding through something or reading it more from like a critical or move. Or like I don't know, it's something. It makes sense to me why so many people bounce off it like Kyle did. But
Yeah.
I find it so easy to identify with Quentin here and his internal conflicts and like the social situations. And like I'm also amazed by some of the fantastical things that happen. Like some of them are really creative and interesting and thought-provoking.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I
I
was
mean,
I felt good after you loved this. I was like, you know what? I just reread this. I loved it. Zamar, it worked for him. I'm gonna recommend it to Kyle. And
didn't work
yeah,
for him.
nope.
um, no, man. I mean, I think it is. It's a very, it's a book that hits very close to home. I think like it is one of those books where some people they will really be able to connect and relate with Quentin, and that's not to say that he's a good person. but it's just like that. I guess like his depression and like the way he deals with the mundanity of life,
Mm-hmm.
And all of that, and just like I think thematically it's a very rich book.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
really well written, I have to say, and
And he has positive and negative qualities. Like
yeah,
he's
no,
very real.
no,
Like he's very organic because
these very organic
so
and
many
realistic
times there are
characters.
characters in fantasy who either are skewed towards being like almost fully positive, like some of my favorite characters. Like I like reading these characters, like
Yeah,
Corben and the Faithful and the Fallen, but they have almost no negative qualities to them, which is not particularly realistic. It's more escapist
yeah.
um, to inhabit that kind of character.
And the
Whereas
thing
to
is,
inhabit Quentin, yeah, he has
yeah,
his positives and negatives, and a lot of people I don't think like having the negative things maybe reflected back at them.
yeah, it's
It
it's
makes them
it's
feel
it's almost
like
too close to home, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah,
the problem. And the thing is, like I've kind of come to just some personal understanding that like most people don't want realistic characters. I think it's extremely rare that like you're reading a book and you're looking for a realistic character. You want your characters to have a net balance of redeeming qualities with very minimal not redeeming
mm-hmm.
qualities. Because I think like otherwise it can be kind of hard and heavy to read. But
Yeah,
sometimes those books are really impactful. Like those are the most impactful ones are the ones where the characters just feel so extremely human. I personally think I think like Hob characters are very
yeah.
realistic, and it's also one
TGK.
of yeah, for sure. And it's one of the reasons why like Fitz is maybe one of the most controversial characters in fantasy. Like for every person that loves him and has him as their favorite character of all time, there's at least another person who just can't stand Hobbs writing just because they don't
Yeah,
like Fitz. Right? Like I
yeah.
see those all the
Oh,
time.
he's so dense. He's always making the worst decisions, and
Yeah. But
yeah,
like put yourself in his shoes, right? Like you are pretty dense most of the time. At least I am. I don't know
yeah,
if other
yeah,
people are
yeah,
smarter, but like
yeah, yeah.
and like that's the
And
thing
we
with
do let emotion cloud our judgment. Yeah.
yeah. Hey Shad, how's it
Hello,
going?
Shad. Welcome. You're catching the tail end. Uh,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
like
but
I think you are capturing the why we connected to the magicians, and the writing is interesting here because it's not written in a like a GGK
no, no.
hop. Like it's not the it's very has a modern voice,
Yeah.
but it does feel very carefully considered. And I do think once again Grossman comes from a more like literary writing background, and I like with Erickson there's just more attention given to the precision of language and
Absolutely.
subtext.
Yeah.
And like this is a thin book, but I feel like so much happened and the characters had such rich
It's
journeys and lives.
it's very time efficient. Or like it's very word
Yeah.
efficient, very time efficient. Oh look, Shad also like Blackwater. So I've been trying to convince Ben for like the last 15 minutes to read Blackwater. So we're on the same page there. But
Wow,
anyway,
he's yeah.
um, yeah. So like yeah, the
So
Magicians. That was a great pick, man. I really liked it. And
oh good.
but you know the thing with it was that it is, like I said, it hits close to home. So it's got like this sense of heaviness with it, where like I didn't feel ready to just jump into the next book right away.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
like it was like yeah, I need to like
Oh
I need
my
to
god,
process.
the stuff like book two, like and three, they go into crazy directions. Like this is not a predictable trilogy at all, and it just goes in like places you would just never expect. And some of the darkest things, maybe one of the darkest things I've ever read, is in book two. Like
Nice.
it gets grim in certain places, but I think yeah, it's not the most escapist read all throughout.
Yeah.
But yeah. One thing I wanted to do before we left was
I also have to point out, Ben, I don't know if you can still hear me, but
yeah.
another series which I read thanks to you this year was that one. That's the one I was going to
Let's
talk about.
go. Let's
And
go.
I don't know if Nico's still here, but I loved like watching
The
him.
most underread, underappreciated modern fantasy series in existence, The Empire of Salt. And look at these covers. Great. I love Darian's cover, Shang's cover. But what an efficient series. I mean, this
Yeah,
is the size of like a nice, normal, like chunky fantasy book. That's the whole series.
that's Nico.
And we
there's a lot of
Like,
story in those 3 books.
yeah, like I love this the trilogy and the way it builds on itself. Like this is the like least burdensome amount of fantasy world building you could possibly get in a series. There's like it's just like an alternate version of Earth, and you get to know one city state in book 1, Darien, and it's like an early modern Londonish type of place, and there's drama around here with a few interesting characters. And then book 2, though, we go off to like an East Asian inspired city state. We get introduced to one more place in this world, Shang, and then we follow a few characters who are journeying to Darien, and then it all kind of the East meets West kind of motley crew coming together to battle the evil menace that's coming for them in Sword Saint. Like the way that this trilogy builds on itself was just great, though each one stands alone really well, which is rare in like fantasy series and trilogies. Like these books are very much an interconnected series, but they stand alone really well. And there's like so much praise I get there with these. There's great character voice, just like with Abercrombie or Lynch. There's cleverness in the dialogue and these distinctive character voices. And the characters, they always end up being more nuanced than I thought when they were first introduced. Like I thought like, oh, this is going to be this character type or this is going to be this character type. They all ended up being more complex than I first thought once they were introduced. And I was very impressed with the character writing, the plotting, very fun and engaging. And what a like this is such a fresh, like unique series in fantasy. Like what do you have to say about Empire?
Yeah, lots of things. So just Shad's comment here that he's less likely to connect the book that is shorter. And like I get that. There's a different charm to short versus long books, I think. I would say with like these 3, they are continuous in a way. Like even though you get new characters, you still keep going with some of the older characters and stuff. So I think the 3 books work together really well as a cohesive series. And personally, I just really like how zany and wild it is. Like just it's very imaginative, you know, like Eagleton just let his imagination loose, and some of the craziest, strangest things happen, and sometimes they don't even make sense, but you're like, I'm here for it because they're just having fun.
Yeah, and just things I've never seen before. Like there's all these different magical artifacts, and when we get a reveal on like what they do, they were always interesting and weird and powerful in their
creative.
own unique way. And like and they all played an interesting role in the events. And and there was a lot of mystery behind it too. Like he didn't explain everything. Like there's like these magical artifacts are basically left over from this more like ancient civilization, the Empire of Salt, which we like learn almost nothing about. It's just like this modern world is kind of built up, you know, around the ruins of this ancient, more magical empire. Like I like that, you know, this modern drama plays out among like, you know, this mystery that we don't end up getting fully explained. It's like truly the anti-Stormlight approach to epic fantasy. Like Stormlight is all about building out the secondary world, and by the end of the 5th book, like fully explaining the history and all the lore that brought us to the present moment. It's like this is truly like the opposite approach. Like in like 1,000 pages, telling the entire thing with almost no like reveals on the history and the lore. It's like it's like the opposite, really, of Stormlight.
And I mean, I think the mystery makes it more compelling, personally. And like Nico said, I think he hit the nail on the head that Eagleton took all the crazy stuff that he couldn't write about in his historical fiction, and he just put it in this trilogy. And I think that's pretty much exactly what it is. So I would say it's like it's got great characters too, and like a really fun, driving plot. It doesn't really feel like it stagnates at any point. And I mean, just overall, it's like it's not like absolute crazy masterpieces, but they're really fun books that are like, completely worth.
Like I didn't have the most emotional experience. It wasn't like, you know, Realm of the Elderlings.
Right, exactly.
These are the kind of just like
short,
This feels like
fun.
escapist, fun, engaging, that still has depth and is very well written and with care.
Yeah.
And it's like the perfect, just like popcorn modern fantasy that you can still care about it, like, but it'll be fun and engaging. Have some tense action here and there, and like really just fun characters. Man, I loved a lot of the Shang characters, like the master swordsman characters. Like
Yeah.
I love that. I can't wait to reread.
Shang was
Honestly,
my
like
favorite.
like and you also loved like Vic Deeds, right? Like
Big Deeds,
he's
man.
like
Big Deeds is my man.
he's
I
he's
just
just
get
like
it, man.
this
I
scout,
understand him.
this scoundrel. But with like, you know, that's the thing about these books. Like, you don't know if like Vic Deeds is just like this like throwaway scoundrel character, or but as the series goes on, you learn like, oh no, he has these other depth to him, and he has a heart that is not shriveled up, and like he can muster some courage and bravery, and
Yeah.
like the way that he surprises you with the characters here is one of the greatest joys of this
Yeah.
trilogy. So, man,
Tell you.
what a joy! That's a gem. That's a gem. And for some horrible
It's a hidden
reason,
gem.
his British publisher just wanted to like shove it away into the corner and not let it see the light of day, because they're worried that their best-selling historical fiction author is gonna sully his name with a fantasy trilogy. God forbid he writes something with a little supernatural, you know, magic to it, and his readers won't like that. So they didn't even like print it. They didn't even like do the audiobooks or ebooks for the US. Like, you can't get them in the US, and they didn't do any
I
sort of
couldn't
marketing
find it.
campaign, because like this is on no one's radar.
Yeah.
And like what's on everyone's radar from these same years, like Greenbone Saga, but this is better.
I enjoyed
This
it
is
more.
where it's at.
Um,
This is where it's
yeah.
at.
So Heidi says that sometimes popcorn readers was just what you need, and I think this fits that bill really well. Like a shorter book, just get through it quickly and enjoy it a lot. Sorry, I need some water.
And the
So then,
narration is great. Like the Daniel
yeah,
Wayman, I think, was the narrator. Like, he was amazing. He was
he did a
great.
great job. Did a great job.
So they're a lot of fun.
So
Oh, what was
then,
your question?
oh, what I was gonna say is, before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, what are you thinking for 2025? Like any super anticipated series that you're excited for? Any
Oh man,
books that you're
I am
looking at?
truly overwhelmed when I think about plans or TBR. Like, the one thing I think I know I'm gonna do is a reread of most of the Sun Eater books. I reread Empire of Silence last year, although I did get the new Diamond edition, but I don't think I want to reread it again. But I do want to reread the Sun Eater books 2 through 6 in the lead up to book 7.
Yep.
And that should be coming out late this year. Those are chunky books, so like I expect that'll be a good portion of like my late fall leading up to that. I like keeping momentum with stuff. Like, when I lose momentum, it then gets harder and harder to pick back up. So I do want to keep momentum with Vorkosigan and read like the last 10 or so of those books. There's so many of them. Oh,
Yeah.
Nika, yeah, definitely got to get into Sun Eater.
I
This is
think
the
I'm
time
gonna,
too. The last book is
yeah.
he's basically like just about done writing it, and he's shooting for a late 2025 release.
Yeah.
So it is
I
the
think,
perfect time. It's the perfect time to become a Sun Eater fan.
Nico, let's read it together, man. Like I want to read it this year as well, for sure. And I also want to read Daughter of the Empire. So I know
Yeah,
Heidi.
like I hear amazing things. The problem with that, and there's, if it was its own isolated series, that would be easier to pick up. But because it is within the world of the Rift War saga, I know that there are crossovers, and so like I want to read the Feist trilogy first, which is like a big, like, I think 1980s trilogy, and that is like a little bit in my way of reading the Empire trilogy. I know you don't have to, but
Yeah.
Nico could probably clear that
Just
up
you need
if we think it's necessary. But that I do want to read that. That's high on the TBR.
Yeah, he says you don't need to read the original for Empire, but he highly recommends
I
it.
know need though. I'm like a completionist kind of in my personality, so like I know we don't need to, but I might need to.
Could just be more amazing books, man. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I want to get to all that. I got to get into words because people are raving about words all the time on my corner of booktube, and like I'm feeling left out. I
Yeah,
want to maybe read the To Ride to Hell's Chasm standalone first, but I don't know. We'll see. Man,
Yeah.
2025. There's things that have been on my priority TBR for so long, like
And the priority
some of the
TBR is longer
some
than the actual
some
TBR.
some KJ Parker standalones.
Mhm.
Like first of all, like Tchaikovsky is one of my favorite authors, and he has just such a big backlist. Like
Yeah.
I feel like this burden is on me of just like I haven't read all the books of some of my favorite authors. It's like a lot of Tchaikovsky's like sci-fi standalones and fantasy standalones I have not read yet.
I want to read Shadows of the Apt very soon.
Yeah, I mean that's a just like Empire of Salt. Like that is a absolutely fantastic popcorn series that like you can keep on the edge of your seat for many books, and there's depth to it. It's not gonna like blow your mind with the depth of the prose or the emotional resonance of the character work, like, but it's just like super compelling and creative. So like in the same vein of like how engaging Empire of Salt is, Shadows of the Apt is like probably the most comparable reading experience I've had to it.
Okay.
And the audios are great. Like the narrator was so fantastic for that one.
Sweet.
And those work amazing on audio, like because they're not like Malazan level depth. Like that is like an amazing epic fantasy series for audio.
Nice.
Oh, so that's a good one for you. If you want more popcorn. This one. It's like I love the writing entity that is James S.A. Corey.
Yep.
Like I love The Expanse. I freaking love Mercy of Gods. And I have not read a single thing that Daniel Abraham has written alone. And
Ben, in case you're forgetting, I said I was thinking of reading The Long Price Quartet next. And you said I was thinking of reading The Prophet of Idan next. And I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll read that with you. And then you ditched me. So anyway, I'm very excited to read LPQ this year very soon.
Yeah, so this will happen. We should absolutely buddy read this. And
For sure.
I deserve all the flack that you're giving me about Prophet of Idan. I have dropped the ball on that one, but I will be picking that up. So that's a priority too.
No worries.
And then probably finishing that trilogy out, honestly. But I'm excited. I can't delay this anymore. This has to happen this year. Let's see what else.
Same.
The Daniel Abraham.
Speaking of.
Oh man. Oh yeah. That is also in that more like just going on a tense, fun popcorn ride of just like another one where the audios are amazing, absolutely amazing. Man, I love a lot of those types of series where they're not the deepest thing in the world, but I get wrapped up in them and they just hit a certain sweet spot, like Shadows of the Apt, Expanse, Empire of Salt. Like I couldn't just do all Realm of the Elderlings like all the time. Like that's a little bit too heavy for me to just do all the time. Like in certain doses, it's amazing. But I
yeah, you need like
a
bit of a break.
So we got to do some Daniel Abraham, and you know what? On my priority TBR that I feel like I am moving closer to reading. It's these guys.
Yeah, I know those books.
Your books. So these are they're in my like consciousness of in the few things that I am like feeling drawn to want to read soon. Like, so that is real. That'll be happening.
That's very exciting. I'm very, very curious about your thoughts, because it is like, yeah, like I just want to know what my friends think of my books. To be honest, like that's more or less it. Kay was so kind. She put book 2 in her top 5, and it like pretty much made my top 5 of 2024, and it pretty much like made my year. Like I'm
Nice.
I'm
And that's not like,
but,
you know, if it's going in someone's big end of year list, like that's real. Like that's and Esme, it made onto her top list of for indie, right?
yeah, it made it onto Esme's list as well. So it's just been
She
like,
reads a million books,
I
like a
know,
million,
I was shocked
and
when she like put up
you
her
made it into
top
her
10.
top
I
10
almost like
indie,
cried on
right?
the spot, and I was like, no, I'm not worthy. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So I'm very happy that those books are out there and they've got some great reception.
Oh man, some of these that I have not read are like they are a literal burden on me. Like, I read the first Wizard of Earthsea book a few years ago, and I really loved her writing. Like, I found
Yeah.
it to be deep and interesting and relatable. And like, I just never continued past that first book. And so like this whole like giant tome feels like a burden on me. And then there's like her sci-fi standalones, which get so much rave reviews. So I need to continue Earthsea. That's a priority. And then another one.
Good night, Nico. Thanks a lot for joining, man.
So this Malazan prequel series, like as the years build between like when I finished all these and Esselman's other books, like I feel like it's only gonna hurt my enjoyment of these prequels. Or maybe not. Maybe you could totally appreciate these fresh, but like I want to get to these because they're supposed to be pretty cool prequel books for the Malaz and stuff. So they've been a priority for years at this point.
Nice. Yeah.
We'll see. But like,
TBR,
I don't know. I like to read. I like to just be a mood reader. I like to look at my shelf, like when I'm looking for new books, and like just like what am I in the mood for right now? I'll like look around. I love looking at like my closet of books and my shelves, seeing what strikes me. So I don't like setting up a big TBR, but those are some where I'm feeling like, man, I really want to get to those. But do you have any of those? LPQ sounds like LPQ.
LPQ. I mentioned Sun Eater. Damn, I'm blanking. Nemesis Gates. What's that one? The Expanse. The Expanse and Shadows of the App. So those are like the major series that I was thinking about.
Oh, nice. Oh, those are some of my faves.
There's
some
a
of
lot
my
of stuff
favorite of the faves.
And also more Bernard Cornwell. So like either The Last Kingdom or the Sharp books. I know that you're particularly fond of the Sharp books. So
like I couldn't get into Last Kingdom. I did the first 2 books this year. It just didn't pull me in. Oh my god, the narrator for the Sharp books, like he is to die for. He is Stephen Pacey level to die for.
Okay.
And those books are my popcorn addiction of just like, man, I need to have a fun time.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I love those books.
Okay. So the other one, which I think I recommend to you highly, do you know the Riverfall Chronicles by Jacqueline Hagan, the Wickwire Watch?
Oh, that's that series. Okay. Yes, that's on your priority TBR. I have not. I have to make tough calls because I have too much on my TBR and I own too many books already. Where it's like, I saw a few reviews where I got a good enough sense of like the style of story where I'm like, I don't have full confidence that it's going to be for me.
So what I will say is like I read book 1 last year, and then I read books 2 and 3 kind of over the break, and then like the first week of January. So that book 2 was the one where I was saying like that probably would have snuck into my favorites list because
wow,
yeah, like book
Wait,
2
how
and
many
3,
are there?
there's 4 books out so far out of 7, I think, planned.
And you've
Yeah,
done 3?
I've done 3. Yeah.
Oh.
But
Oh, so
anyway,
are you all in on the series now?
I'm all in, man. Like I
Oh
love it.
wow.
It's
Oh
actually
wow.
like so good. She's such a talented writer, and it's
Ooh.
like the books are
Okay.
just really atmospheric. You have this wonderful found family. There's like proper emotional moments, and yeah, super well written. Also, like one of those perfect audiobook to author matches, like we mentioned before. So
Okay. I mean, that's you're
I don't want to
you're
stack your
doing
TBR too much,
you're
but
doing the hard sell. Like that's see, that's a non-completed series though. I have so many completed series that
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
excited for. Like that it's ridiculous. So I'm hesitant to go for the non-completed ones because I inevitably lose momentum if I wait even just a year between releases, like, and I don't reread.
Yeah.
I am never as into the continuing as when I can just binge them.
So I will let you know as I go through it, and if it's worthy and it gets completed, I will convince you. In the
Oh
trade.
man, I am pumped for your year of Sun Eater. Man,
Yeah,
I
I'm excited for it too.
I'm gonna be hard pressed, honestly. Like if whenever you start, like that'll probably be my impetus for doing my reread. Like
Oh yeah, okay,
that's also another one where it's one of my favorite narrators of all time. Perfect marriage between narrator and author and story and character.
nice.
That's like it's one of the awkward things about the Fitz audiobooks is that it's this first person retrospective. It's so intimate,
Yeah,
yet the narrator changes across the series. It is so jarring.
yeah,
Like Langton, I thought, was the perfect embodiment of Fitz for the Tawny trilogy. And like it's weird trying to listen to like the Farseer trilogy or even like the audiobooks for Fits in the Pool were like weird for me a little bit. like
no,
some of the different like they were fine. It was fine. I forget even who it was that was the narrator, but like his different interpretations of Fitz and like the Fool characters in particular, like were jarring
yeah.
compared to Langton.
I think broadly speaking, the realm of the Elderlings needs to be re-recorded in its entirety, and to the point where I did
yeah.
a large portion of my read was physical because like the
Yeah,
narratives were not
yeah,
working.
yeah. And that's one where like the prose is so elegant, where like it is you're not gonna notice clunky prose when you read it physically. But
Yeah.
man, Sun Eater, that's one where the audio is like it works great. Like first person retrospective, like it
It's
is
like my
so
favorite
easy to
kind of
get
story.
immersed with just
Yeah.
the audiobook. And like his style of writing, it really is suited for audio. Like I'm so pumped for you with Sun Eater. Like I think that is your kind of story. Like Rockio is kind of like an intellectual personality, and like I think his sensibility is just one where you are gonna like dig in and find so much richness there. Oh my god, I am so pumped for you with Sun Eater. Oh my god,
I'm excited.
I definitely like I got the Broken Binding ones and his personal like self-pub special edition. Like I'm gonna have fun rereading with my new editions. But
That'll be awesome, man. I'm excited
oh
for it.
like oh my god, this is just some of the craziest stuff like happens in books like 2 and 3 and 4 and
And
5 and
5 and
6.
6,
Man,
and then
like
probably 7.
like it is a shame that like he was a college student when he wrote book 1. He's like the oldest soul for a college student that probably ever existed. But like book 1, like that is his debut book, the start of a series. It's like definitely slower in the developing the plot than like the other books, and so it's a shame just because I know that like some people bounce off of it for that reason of like being a little slow, but I don't think
Yeah,
you
man.
particularly clash with like slower developing
No, no.
stories.
I love that stuff.
So
So
yeah, yeah.
no.
So
So
like yeah.
I am fully expecting it to be the highlight of my year. All I have to do is like try to temper my expectations a little bit because it is very overhyped. So but
Yeah, some things
hopefully,
like I mean GGK was overhyped for me, and then like it didn't matter.
Yeah.
It was, the thing was so great. Nothing could be denied about like me loving it, and the expectations didn't matter. They were exceeded. They were met and exceeded. Like
Nice.
sometimes the hype train, it really only is a negative if it ends up not being justified for you. Like
Yeah.
the hype train for Greenbound Saga like hurt you because you had like huge expectations for it and then didn't meet it. But like it's hard to imagine Rakio not fulfilling the expectations for you personally.
Nice.
I think that is a reader and series match made in heaven. Most likely.
Okay.
Like if I had to predict, I think like you're gonna love Sun Eater and Malazan as far as like what do I feel really good about that I've read that like I think you're gonna like really love. And I think those two I feel pretty confident with. And
Nice.
and then you can enjoy the more popcorny stuff too. So that bodes well for like these other things like Expanse or Shadows of the Apt, because like this is like the engaging kind of action heavy stories that are fast paced, but that also have character depth to them, and so and care in the writing and creativity and interesting voice. And so like yeah, these are all things that I think will work well in these varied series. It's good to have different types of reads too.
100%.
Variety.
Yeah.
All right, my wife is calling. If I
yeah.
I'm just gonna show her that we're still on.
Hello.
Still on.
I'll let him go in a minute. Yeah. So we just crossed 3 hours. I don't know where the time flew, Ben, but we should probably call it there. It is such an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on.
It was a blast. And we will definitely need to do our Realm of the Otherlings ranking because it's clear that we will have differences in opinion.
It's gonna get spicy.
We got to do that. We got to do that soon.
Yeah, for sure. But it's been such a pleasure, man. Thanks so much.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah. And a huge thank you to all the people who joined me in the chat. I cannot believe how many amazing people were here.
Yeah.
I think they came for you, man. It's not about me.
Oh, they're coming for you now. Now you gotta be comfortable being the center of attention.
Okay. All right, man. Well, good night, everyone. And thanks so much for joining. And we will end the stream there. Now it's awkward.